Hello and welcome to episode 27 of Shockwaves. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Galluzzo, sitting here with Mr. Elric Kane.
Hey, man.
And that's it?
I was going to go for the deep end of horror.
Bad intro,
well, I looked
Elric.
over your head and
That's
I
the
saw
energy you had?
our Texas friends.
I know. I was going to introduce them. I didn't even introduce our guests
Yeah.
yet. And you're
Who was
already
our
introducing
guest?
our
Elric
our
always
co-host,
jumps
I
like
meant.
right on in there.
Maybe I shouldn't be introduced first
He's the last
anymore.
one. All right, Ryan Turek is here with us.
Hello.
See?
Who do I have sitting to my right?
Well, he doesn't even
Rebekah
know the Texans.
McKendry.
Doctor.
Dr. McKendry's here.
No,
Holy
not even doctor. We call her Doc now. It's Doc.
Just
I'm
Doc?
Doc now.
What
I'll
are
take
you,
it.
What are you a doctor of exactly?
Yeah.
We were trying to figure
Philosophy
this out.
with my focus.
Philosophy.
Doctorate.
Horror philosophy or
No,
just philosophy?
it's my doctorate. It's a doctorate of philosophy, but my focus is in horror and exploitation cinema.
Okay, so he said marketing last week. Elric.
No, that's the focus of my dissertation is focused on horror and exploitation marketing, but my general degree is focused in horror and exploitation filmmaking.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
We're
you.
very proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elric, it looks like
We
you have
know it
something to
took a lot.
say.
Yeah, what do you got to say?
Well, we don't have to have that shot game anymore where she talks about almost having a dissertation. You are now a Doc.
It
I can't call you
happened.
Beck anymore. Just
Yeah.
Doc. I like it.
Right. And we do have a special guest sitting in on today's episode.
Yep.
Our friends from Texas, John Holland
Yeah.
and his wife Miranda. Hi, guys.
Hi,
At
guys.
the other end. John is the guy that does all of our graphics for us. And anytime you see a fancy Shockwaves logo with a cool photo somewhere on our Facebook or Twitter, he is responsible.
But from way back, Killer POV, he did years of
Yeah,
Killer
awesome
POV
stuff.
design. So.
He helped us out in Texas Frightmare when they sent us with wrong equipment.
Yes, in
and
fact,
no cords.
To tell that story, this is just for all you listeners out there, because this could be you one day. My favorite John Holland story is that we went 2 years in a row to Texas Frightmare. First year we met him. He helped us out at the Fango table. And I believe your husband, Dave, recorded our live episode there. And then the next year, we had so many problems with our equipment that
They sent us with the cords didn't match the boards and the microphones didn't even go with the cords.
we were not prepared.
For those
However,
wondering why we left.
But John saved the day, and he was on pretty much his hands and knees behind the stage, like maneuvering and recording our podcast. And I think Elric was like, last year you could meet us, and this year you'll work for us and actually record our show. So
We're a
thank
very
you, John,
integrated
for all-
family.
I'm starting to like our in-house audience.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like the Talking Dead, where we never know who's going to show up at any
that's
given
2 weeks
time
in a row.
to hang out in the
I
I
conference
just
room
saw
with
the
us.
intern down the street. You guys want me to go bring her back
Yes.
in?
For those of you listening at home that weren't here to see it, an intern showed up that Bekah invited, but Bekah neglected to tell us.
I was in the hospital, kids. Sick.
Me and Elric are holding a beer, and some girl shows up. She's like, I'm here to sit on your show. We're like, oh, yeah,
Cool.
come on in, I guess.
Let's keep it going. I like the in-house audience. Let us know if you're in LA.
It's fun. It's fun. But anyway, so that's all out of the way. And obviously, over the Thanksgiving break, we had plenty to watch.
Yeah.
So, so let's dig in.
Oh, and also, I just want to say,
Yes.
I just want to say thank you to our listeners who have been sticking with us through the kind of down periods and through the bonus episodes. We're getting your feedback on the bonus episodes. We're going to mix it up a little bit, with some other entries during the holiday break. And
That's right.
yeah,
a lot of fun.
always providing.
Yes.
No
Always
real
spinning too.
downtime. No dark time.
No downtime for any of
No.
us. So yeah, we've all seen a lot of stuff because obviously the long break. So let's go around the table and do one at a time.
Yeah.
That way we can go. Elric, why don't you kick it off? Because I think we have a few in common.
Yeah, I'll start with there. I actually inadvertently did a sorority house double feature with no planning that I was going to do this.
Sure.
I kickstarted with the Blu-ray, the Arrow Films Initiation.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
My first note was for them it was clunky, dumb Texas fun. But the cover of that is I would so much rather remake the cover than the actual movie. But I like the movie.
candle?
Yeah, the cover. But
candle?
if you look closely, it's just it looks like a hand that's just finished doing something to a man, and it's all the white is running down, and it's
Right,
candle. It's
right,
it's a very
Elric's
sexualized.
reading a lot.
Oh no! It's trust me, it's the '80s. It is what it is. It's a beautiful time period in America. But the thing about the film, which is really funny, is the first 5 minutes are awesome. And I'm like, oh, I love this dreamy quality to the cinematography. And it's like a weird flashback thing. And there's a guy on fire. And then she wakes up. Daphne Zuniga from Melrose Place wakes up and she in the dorm with Joe Bud. And she's in this weird initiation ceremony with the thing. And it's very cult-like. And look at that, Bekah. Come on. You tell me that's not what it looks like.
Okay.
Just sharing the poster.
Exactly. Look up the initiation poster while you're here.
Okay. Ew.
So I watched that. What did you say? I missed it.
She said ew.
I think everybody's blushing right now.
I've always just looked at that and
Elric
been
for the first time is
I've
spot
never
on.
noticed
It's
it.
yeah, exactly. The first time Ryan's ever called it like it is.
I've always just looked at that and been like, cool cover art. And now I'm like,
Just look
ew.
closer.
Look closer.
Yeah. Don Draper did that one. That's late Don Draper. That's right when he retired. But anyway, the funny thing about it is, so the opening of the movie is really aesthetically, like really kind of great, like all great 80s, 70s films. And then it becomes kind of fairly straight for the rest. I noticed a lot of wide shots, a lot of long takes. And I kind of remember being, I was kind of dissatisfied. Clu Gulager's awesome, wearing an ascot. He's fun. It's one of the, they put a little too much emphasis on the whodunit when it's totally implausible. One of those, I won't ruin it for you, but it's one of those whodunits where it's not, you go, oh yeah, okay, this is ridiculous. But as soon as I watched the extras, I was so satisfied when the guy comes on, and the writer who ended up doing Melrose Place and Beverly Hills 90210 and everything, he comes on, he's like, yeah, I saw the first 3 days of dailies, and every time I went in, I was like, these are the best dailies I've ever seen. Like, these dailies are so great. And the producer walked in, and I said, oh my God, have you been seeing the dailies? Like, they're so good. And he goes, yeah, the first 3 days of dailies are good, and we're now exactly 3 days behind schedule, and I just fired the director. And I'm flying in a TV director to finish the rest of the movie. Because if we go at this rate, we're going to be, I think he said, we're going to be 31 days behind schedule. And so that is why that movie looks that way. The reason you have these really aesthetic and like interesting looking parts are the first 3 days of shooting. The rest is a TV director just hustling through to finish the film. So it definitely made total sense when he said that. But I did like it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I saw it for the first time last year, and I really liked it.
Yeah,
it was an instant buy when Arrow made the announcement. And I have to revisit the Blu-ray. I'm sure it looks gorgeous.
And the interview was good. It's worth it for that reason. And like there really isn't, like, even the worst 80s slasher is still more fun. If you haven't seen it before, is more fun for that one viewing than a lot of other films. And then, so inadvertently, I saw that TCM was playing Killer Party. Yes. Had never seen Killer Party.
I love that movie.
I'd never seen it.
Why?
Okay, well, here we go.
The dance scene. Mostly the dance scene.
I tweeted that. Jackson Stewart quickly jumped on, our guest for next week, and he was like, oh, God, that film's terrible. There's no gore. It's a terrible movie. And then all these other people suddenly come to the defense saying it's so fun. It's one of my favorites. I think Ted Bracewell, somebody said it's like his favorite movie. I got to say,
I just want to say that because you tweeted to our listeners, people were tweeting it because it was on, what was it, on Turner Classic?
Yeah, it was at like 4 in the morning. TCM Underground, when they do their late night. Every week I look out for that.
But because you tweeted it, I DVR'd it too, and I watched it as well. So if there's anything like that is on TCM in the middle of the night,
they do it only on Saturdays.
Let us know so we
can
catch them. Yeah,
I try to do it every week to people. But what's cool about it, it is part of Connexploitation. So even though it's meant to look like an American college film, it's William Fruitt, who's actually one of the main Connexploitation directors. He did Death Weekend, which was the ripoff of Straw Dogs, and he did Funeral Home and Blue Monkey. So he did like 5 or 6 other films from that period. Has Paul Bartel, a lot of good stuff. But the coolest thing is the writer of it is what's his name? Barney Cohen, who wrote my favorite Jason film, The Final Chapter. Oh, and so you would not know.
What are you laughing at, Ryan?
Objectively, it's the best one. Anyway, this is senseless plot, but this movie is okay. There's 17 movies in this movie, and I'm not even joking when I say that's in the first 7 minutes. It opens
Have you
with
seen this?
No.
Okay. Oh, you got.
I was hoping that somebody would DVR. Or
I have
something.
the DVD if you want to borrow it.
Please.
It is so bonkers. Like the first couple minutes, you're like watching. What's the first thing you're seeing? Oh, you're seeing a really campy funeral scene.
It's a funeral scene that's like
where the priest is quoting Wizard of Oz.
The priest, and then immediately it turns into a drive-in movie because they're watching that movie at the drive-in.
They're watching that movie, and then it's an 80s drive-in movie, and the girl starts walking along, and then suddenly she's in a music video for a heavy metal band.
Yes,
and then you're in the music video itself, watching the music video being filmed.
And then you know how like the credit comes up on MTV telling you who the band and artist. That happens. And then the movie starts. Because that has nothing to do with
and
the
no
movie.
connection to the narrative.
That's like the first 10 minutes.
So,
you're like, what am I watching?
It's not a
and do we know
good
why?
movie exactly, but it's fucking bonkers.
And do we know why it aired? Like,
on
because it seemed like really random.
Yeah, TCM's really
does
good.
crazy stuff.
Well, it's just this one thing. So TCM is one thing, but they have one thing Saturday after about 2 a.m. every week. It's called TCM Underground, and so they're purposely showing a movie like that.
Didn't they show blood on Satan's Claw?
They've shown really good stuff.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool that it shows that way, you know.
But the fun thing about the movie is the first act. So it really is 3 movies. The first one is your sex teen comedy, college comedy.
Yeah.
And then the second one is a slasher film, which is probably the least effective. It's really generic the way they go about making it a slasher. But the last 30 minutes, did you get through it? Oh, the whole thing?
Oh, yeah, no, I watched it.
Okay, the last 30 minutes is pretty high end. It suddenly looks like the budget was increased. Possession movie. And the main character goes full exorcist. And it's actually Night of the Demons, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
At the end, when you think about
it's all coming back to me.
Bekah, bring this to work tomorrow.
Yes.
I will bring this in.
I do think it's a must-see of the genre, even if you don't like it. It's got so much crazy. I didn't love it, but I liked it a lot.
The two things I want to say about it is, one, I remember it was really long, and then the slasher part is literally 5 minutes. Like the killer shows up and kills the entire cast. So you're like, oh, all right, well, this just accelerated. Okay.
None of it makes it look
But you guys are missing my favorite part, which is the group dance number to the song Lightning Strikes.
Yeah, this one over here with the
musical
stuff.
It's because they're at a party, but they all start doing the same dance moves. If I'm remembering this correctly. I'm going to
remember that, but I want to.
I swear I remember a dance number.
The only other note I made is the music video portion at the beginning, because again, it's like the character goes into it looks like a Quickie Mart or 7-Eleven, even though it's at the theater, and then nobody's there, so she steals popcorn, and then a band appears and starts playing. The band is, what are they called? White Sister. And the only reason, because I'm like looking at them, like, who the hell are these guys? Now, not only did they do this song for Killer Party called April, but they did a track called Save Me Tonight that's in the Fright Night soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
And also their hit Dancing on Midnight, which is in Halloween 5.
Oh, wow.
So they were like that 80s hair metal band that you've never heard of that somehow is in every horror soundtrack.
Somehow they had a really good manager that placed them in these
But the guy's like balding, but he's got the long hair metal, and you're just like,
that's what I was like, I know that. Is this like the band from Back to School? I couldn't figure it out. I was like, who are these guys?
But it was actually...
that's as far as I got.
If like me, you follow up with the best thing you can do is follow it up. Projection Booth did an episode, so when they go all out 2 hours on an episode, straight away listen to it. It's hilarious. It's really
this?
fun. Yes, for Killer Party.
Wow.
And it's really good. It's like fun to listen. You get the writer talking about his experience on it, the whole shebang. It's just it's a very strange, odd one. But hey, for completists. So let's keep going around.
All right. Well, I'm going to do one that both Ryan and I saw. I checked out a movie that just came out not too long ago called Last Girl Standing.
Yeah.
And I believe it was on the festival circuit at the end of last year. Yeah. And I didn't know much about it. I think the trailer popped up when I was watching another film. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. It reminded me a lot of a book that I plugged on Killer POV a while ago by Matt Serafini, who was one of the contributors at Dread Central. Mm-hmm. He's done a couple of novels now, and he wrote a book called Under the Blade, which I really loved. And that was a hypothetical, like the opening chapter was the hypothetical ending of a Friday the 13th type of movie.
Sure, yeah.
And then the aftermath, like how does a character cope with all that stuff? And basically that's the exact premise of this movie.
Yeah.
Is the last girl standing. It ends, literally the first 5 minutes is the ending of a slasher movie. And she ends up becoming the survivor.
She's got PTSD. So basically she's dealing with PTSD. She's like trying to acclimate to life. All of her friends are dead. She works at a laundromat or a dry cleaners, and she's just trying to get by. And when this new guy comes into her, like into the dry cleaners to start, he's a new employee. It kind of triggers something in her to kind of like come out of her shell a little bit, but then that instigates these visions of this killer coming back. And you never know if it's in her head or if the killer's really back. And then she kind of gets brought into this new guy's friendship circle. And, there are those who kind of embrace this newcomer to their group. And then there's, the bitch that hates her automatically, is super jealous. And then she meets this other girl who is kind of a survivor in her own right. She's got a kind of a past in which she survived something herself. They get along great, and then off we go, into kind of like
what kind of scale is it? Because I haven't even heard of this.
Super low budget indie. I think it was shot in and around Texas.
Yes.
I mean, like in Austin, because I know that the two main actors are from Austin.
Yeah, I watched. I have the DVD of it where there's a special feature. It was written and directed by a guy named Benjamin Moody, and him and his crew are all part of the Austin scene. They've all worked in various degrees on all sorts of Austin independent projects. So this was their own. And, like everybody, they're like, well, we had all these ideas and we did a short. We decided, let's do a horror movie. And this was kind of the idea that he had. And it's funny because ever since I read that book, I've heard this idea several times now. It's like once the idea,
there's a bunch of people exploring that, and what's interesting, and I don't know if you feel the same way. It's like going into this film. It's what separates a film like this from any other sequel that we've seen, a horror sequel. Because what you're doing is you're just skipping the first chapter, you know, and then you're kind of going into the aftermath of the experience.
It, right? Making it
and what they
real.
did is they grounded it. It's less about the kind of jump scares. It's more about the emotion. And then I had two kind of like qualms about it, which one was the killer himself, if you're going to do a slasher kind of throwback, you have to have a great mask. Yeah. You have to have a great visage, something really terrifying. And this dude is wearing he's wearing a jackalope on his head, that's what it looked like. Yeah. And I felt like, and I'm sure, other people will disagree, I felt like what happens to her in the third act isn't entirely earned. But other than that, the journey getting there, I think that a lot of diehard horror fans might have a tough time kind of getting through because it's more drama than it is scares. But if you're a hardcore slasher fan, then I would definitely check it out because it kind of explores the nature of the final girl and her life after a terrifying experience. This isn't Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween 2 laid up and just freaking out. This isn't Scout Taylor Compton, screaming at every single turn, like she does in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, in which she too kind of has PTSD, and what she's going through with Annie is, a strained relationship.
Could it have worked casting somebody from a previous film who had survived a slasher in that role?
Maybe. I mean, I don't think it would,
But I liked it a lot. And I disagree with Ryan. I actually thought the third act is kind of what made it, because again, you're skating the line between horror and drama. Like, is it really a horror movie? But, but it's so steeped in horror, tropes. Yeah. But plays with them in an interesting way, and also I thought the lead actress was really good.
Yeah,
like
she
the
was.
girl that played the survivor girl. There was she didn't. It wasn't like the traditional perfect looking blonde from a slasher movie. There's something about her that
I think she did. She was a perfect archetypal survivor.
Yeah,
it was kind of like somebody from like Friday the 13th, like Amy Steele or something like that.
Yeah, that's what they nailed, was getting somebody that felt like that.
She felt real.
But did she was her character name non-male or female? Did it fit the old
I don't remember that.
Is that a requirement?
It's one of them. Stretch. That's always like Alex.
Oh, yeah.
They always
I never
non-sexualize.
noticed that, actually.
It's like one of the Carol Clover points.
So, no, I rather liked it a lot.
Gravitas put it out on iTunes and DVD last couple weeks, so you can check it out there.
All right. What about?
I have a quick.
Cameron.
Is it? Oh, perfect.
Cameron.
Yes.
There you go.
Well done.
Well, that's her name.
I have a quick correction. The dance scene that I was describing is not from Killer Party. It's from Dead Kids, a.k.a. Strange Behavior, which is an Australian film, which for some reason, because it was dancing, I put it in that because it would have fit in that and you wouldn't have even noticed the difference, because that's the type of movie Killer Party is.
And because we were mentioning again, just if you weren't sold on Killer Party, it was actually meant to be called April Fool. And because of April Fool's Day, they couldn't. And that's why it has this. Killer Party doesn't tell you anything about this movie. It's an April Fool's Day movie. It's all about April Fool's Day. The whole point is having a big initiation thing
now we have
on
two.
April Fool's. So
3 if you include the April Fool's Day.
So we have some movies to do next April. We're good.
And Killer Party, it does have a great cover. I remember it's like a girl in a prom dress with
and
like the skeleton unzipping it.
Almost looks like the Night of the Creeps art.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Very
it
similar to
does.
that,
It's very similar style. So I decided I was going through Netflix, Amazon, one of them, and I stumbled on 2008's Pathology.
Oh, yeah.
Which I read. I know I watched it in 2008, but I reread the synopsis and I was like, I have no memory of this, but the summary sounds really cool. It's about a group of medical students who kind of like start daring each other to see who can get away with murder, like who can commit the perfect crime and not get caught. And supposedly the people that they're killing are these horrible people. So they find like the child molester in the hospital, and how do you go kill him without getting caught? And
Saw meets Flatliners.
Yeah,
So-
very Saw me. So I decided to rewatch that one, and I now remembered why I don't remember it as much. It's just
What a setup.
I know, and
That was
there
the
were
gentlest smackdown I've ever heard.
there
That
were
was so gentle.
there were some really good parts to the movie, but I wanted it to be better than it was. And I think that the problem that I had with it is that every single character in the movie was a total asshole.
Yeah.
There was not a single person that, even the lead protagonist that you're following around, who is supposed to be, kind of getting shoved into these students who are already committing murder, and you're kind of supposed to feel for him in this situation. He's still a dick too.
Is it the Heroes Kid? Is that the movie I'm thinking of?
Yeah. Milo Ventimiglia.
That's
okay,
him.
that's
And it's
okay.
written by
David-
Mark Neville Dean and Brian Taylor from
get outta
Crank.
here. Yeah.
And David Schlowerman, I'm going to say his name wrong.
Smaller?
No. It's that guy directed
foreign
it.
filmmaker who did a bunch of music videos,
Yeah.
and international stuff, and they brought him.
Can we talk about Tourist Trap anyway? Now that we're smaller.
Now that we're smaller.
I was on the
yeah.
set of Pathology when
Really?
when back in the Shock Till You Drop days. That was like an early set visit.
It's
And
your
The
fault.
effects
It's
are
all your
great.
fault.
Yeah, you did it,
distracted
Turek.
them.
Why did you make everybody an asshole?
that was the problem I noticed on set. You were kind of like, okay, why am I getting behind these characters who are dastardly and kind of and even though they kind of have they're going off their moral compass and trying to do good by targeting people
Evil
even worse
people.
than them, kind
Yeah.
of like Dexter. But it still didn't work because they're still dicks.
They're still horrible
like
people.
Dexter has at least a moral compass.
Yeah,
you know?
and
That's
then
why
there were
Flatliners
these-
are so good because they all have so much
I
baggage.
remember them being all
issues,
assholes too.
Well,
No.
only really Billy Baldwin
Yeah,
was definitely
No,
undeniable.
but Kiefer was definitely, because he was
Yeah.
trying to get with Julia, but Kevin was like, no, man.
But then they got their comeuppance
Yeah.
by the things that were in their past, and I think that's why it's
I love
such a good movie.
Flatliners.
It's a
Yeah,
great
oh my
movie.
God.
I love Flatliners.
this week on the site, I wrote about remakes that are coming up this year, because they're getting ready to do a
Do it.
remake or reboot. I don't know which it is, of Flatliners. And I was
Semi-sequel?
yeah, the original
Apparently
scared the
Keeper's
Wasn't
in
shit
it.
out of me.
Lazarus Effect kind of that?
Yes, it was. Very
Kind
much.
of. It was like a PG-13 version,
think.
yeah.
That was before your time. Ease off. You're in the clear.
Bad.
I haven't seen it.
It's like a light Flatliners.
Okay.
So yeah, so that was Pathology. I wanted it to be better than it was, but that said, the effects were still really good, and it's worth a watch for horror fans. Just expect every single character to be a total dick.
Which some people get off on.
Yeah, yeah.
I might even miss it. Believe it or not.
All right, Ryan?
I saw, there was a bunch of stuff that I watched, and I think I consumed more of this during this holiday break than I've ever had before. But I kicked things off with CHUD because
Yes.
Arrow put out the
Like
Blu-ray
you
of it.
do.
And yeah, as you should. And I hadn't seen CHUD in a couple of years, and I tweeted about this. It is a Larry Cohen movie that's not a Larry Cohen movie.
Yeah.
It has that very distinctive New York feel with a cast of characters that are so unique to this big city, you know?
Yeah.
But I forgot how much they cram into this film because it's a social commentary on homelessness. It's a social commentary on, big corporations and government.
Toxic waste.
Toxic waste.
Yeah.
Toxic waste. I forgot the CHUDs were all homeless people. I thought they were just like rando mutants of people who just passed through. It's like, no. It is literally the sins of what we dump and what we leave behind coming back to literally bite us, and it's a solid movie. It's a really grim, somber, wacky movie with some really great effects and a great cast. Everybody who's
John
in
Hurd.
it. John Hurd,
Daniel Stern?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Daniel Stern and even like, John Goodman shows up, as the cop. And that was a funny thing. I remember the first time I saw CHUD, it was one of those warped experiences in which my dad was like, I rented this movie on VHS. You want to see a great scene? And he showed me the diner sequence.
How weird.
And I was terrified
That's funny.
because all it is like these two cops go into the diner and then the CHUD attack. And you've got like the homeless man outside the diner who's actually the director. And then it's like a bloodbath. And then they show the bloodbath and I was like, oh my God. What happened? And he's like, that's it. You'll see this movie later in life. And I was like, what the hell? But Christopher Curry stars in it. But it's a solid movie. And I think Arrow's Blu-ray is fantastic. You got a lot of great interviews, a lot of great bonus features. So
If you ever see John Hurd at the farmer's market in Studio City,
I've seen him at my gym.
don't mention that.
Really?
Why have you?
Oh, yeah. I went straight up to him and said, dude, Cutter's Way. Best role of it. And he goes, yeah, it's good. I go, what about CHUD? And he just looked at me with death.
Oh.
He just looked at me like, move on if you're not
I
buying
go to that
soap.
farmer's market.
He's selling some
Every
soap.
he was
there.
selling soap?
He's
Yeah, it's
selling
like must be
soap?
his wife or daughter or
Oh
something.
my God,
He
we
hangs
see
out.
that booth every
yeah,
week.
he's there. That's John Hurt.
Is it next to Ed Begley's booth? Because Ed Begley
Yeah, Ed
has his
Begley's
own
there.
booth
Is he-
at the farmer's market selling eco detergent. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh my
like,
God. Yeah,
he
and
does
all I want to
everything
do is
green,
just
Ed
go.
Begley.
I've got this Transylvania 6000 vinyl that I need you to sign. By
Oh wait, you mean the Transylvania 6 5000?
I love
I love that movie.
We should do an
that
episode
movie.
just on that.
Oh,
When Jeff
yeah.
Goldblum will do the show, we'll do it.
You know-
See if we can get Gina Davis.
listener.
When Dave and I first moved to New York City, this is like a couple of decades ago now, we went on this like Films of New York tour where they drive you around and like show you where Ghostbusters was and everything. And midway through the tour, they go, does anybody have any other movies that they want to see? And Dave raises his hand and he goes, can we see the Chud Diner?
We're going to start the
Dead
CHUD Street
silence.
Trash basket case tour.
Well, the funny thing is, on the Blu-ray, the Arrow Blu-ray, you have Ted Geoghegan, and you have him like going around Mike Ingold showing us the spots where they filmed Chud. It's great.
Wow.
It's so
That's
good.
fun.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Elric.
I saw
You're up again.
Bryan Bertino's new movie. I got
The Monster.
Yeah, I
Monster.
got food poisoning all Thanksgiving pretty much. I was out.
Dude.
And I was lying there one day when no one was home, and I put on The Monster. I'm always excited about a new Bertino film because I really do think he grounds things in a way that's really exciting and, mixes things up. I like a lot of people, wasn't crazy for the Mockingbird, but it still had parts that were interesting to me. But I really like The Monster. I think it's a really strong... The performances, the little girl might be my performance of the year. Like, she's so strong for a kid performance, and I think Zoe Kazan's so against type in this role that it's really interesting. She's when I saw the posters for this, I thought it was a story about sisters. And then you watch the movie and go, oh, wow, she's
no.
like, probably like a 16-year-old mom when she had this kid, and she's really, you see how alcoholism and partying and just her life has kind of ravaged her, and how this little girl is having to look after her mom. That's one of the kind of A story where you keep seeing flashbacks too, and then the other story is they're driving to take her, probably permanently, this daughter, to her father's, probably forever, like probably handing her off basically. And they're on this trip and the car breaks down and there's a monster in the woods, and that's it. This is a very simple movie. To the point where that's probably it's missing just a little gear to be a flat out masterpiece because everything's done well. It's shot well. It's written well. The emotion's there.
It's the pacing.
Yeah,
the pacing
exactly.
really bogs it down.
Yeah.
I saw it at Beyond Fest on the screen, and in the theater it was just amazing, and I was surprised by how much monster it was. Usually with
it's a
smaller
real monster.
indie films, if I'm told it's a monster movie.
A previous guest of ours did the monster.
I-
Woodruff.
Yeah.
Woodruff did that?
He's in there.
Wow.
He's in
Also, yeah.
Yeah, usually I would expect to see like, oh, you're going to see an arm or maybe a
And the-
foot.
and the
but
attacks,
yeah,
yeah.
it's pretty
The
prominent.
attacks
And the
Good.
attacks are merciless.
Yeah.
It's just really, really vicious
And
stuff.
there was a subtext there, but it's like with a movie like that, and I'm not somebody who needs, like, with Babadook, I don't always need an ending where it all ties up, It can just be a monster attacking. But with a movie this simple, I felt like, I was kind of looking for the subtext. So what is the monster part of her rage and the child's thing? And it might be there a little. Like there's these little things that are alluded, and she's definitely, becoming, I don't want to spoil, what happens in the film, but she's taking power. This little girl is growing up. It's literally a coming of age drive.
Yeah.
I really recommend it as people kind of round out their top 10s. What's shocking to me is maybe how under discussed this film's been. Like, I really think this got no press.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw it at Beyond Fest as well, and my recollection of it, has in terms of like the fondness for it has increased, because I was a little lukewarm on it at first because it was a pacing thing, and it was a long night and blah 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 blah, and I was kind of like, I don't know, but as I thought about it, it was much like when I saw February, aka Blackcoat's Daughter, because I saw it at TIFF. I was a little lukewarm on it, but the next morning I woke up and it was still rattling around in my brain and things, and I really think what works so well in that movie is the mother-daughter relationship.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, really
Did you
good.
notice Scott Speedman?
Yeah, when like hardly
Out
just
of
a quick,
nowhere.
random scene.
Out of nowhere, yeah.
But it definitely the best thing about it is it tells you again that Bertino is really a talent to keep watching. That they're making films that he wants to make, and he's got a really adult heart, like things not made for kids. I wouldn't have enjoyed that at 15, as much.
Oh yeah, there's too much because you need to be an adult, and I think actually having a kid helped it because you feel that responsibility that she's completely neglecting. Like I felt bad watching this movie.
Well, and I feel bad for her too,
Yeah.
like the mom, because as bad as she is, you're like, the idea, young people having kids is so hard at whatever age. You realize just how tough how kind of isolated you are, especially if she's not married or anything. Anyway, really recommend that one. It's just on VOD right now. I won't really talk about Leopard Man, but that was another in my Ternier kind of journey. I'm trying to get, Val Lewton. I'm trying to do all the Val Lewtons. This is probably my least favorite of the ones I've seen. It's very simple. It has some sequences. Jacques Ternier shot it, so he's great. Has some black and white sequences that are mesmerizing, but it also is the least kind of horror to me of the ones I've seen. It's just a leopard's gone loose and kind of like cat people, and it's killing some people, and then somebody uses the fact that there's a loose leopard to actually commit a couple murders and blame it on the leopard.
Oh, sure.
So it's kind of fun, but these movies are it's like 65 minutes or something crazy. So they're so short, but I'll finish. I Walk with a Zombie will be next, so that'll be a lot of fun to kind of revisit that one. And then just last of these ones, Beyond the Walls, I finally got Shudder.
Oh, excellent.
Watch Beyond the Walls. I was
loved it.
You know, here kind of like Monster, I say, this isn't quite an emotional story, right? Like, I just came actually to this podcast from seeing The Arrival, and The Arrival is, the reason I'm bringing it up is the guy who wrote the Thing remake, and he wrote
Eric Heiser.
Lights Out.
Lights Out.
Yeah.
Before this
Lights
movie,
Out, Nightmare on Elm Street remake, The Thing.
I mean, if you think about that, and then you watch The
yeah.
Arrival, you go, "Holy shit!"
Yeah.
Like, and it tells you a lot about. You know, it's not so much the writing as who ends up making your writing.
Yeah.
Like, you get this in the hands of the guy who did Sicario, and you've got a very different movie. That movie's so emotionally resonant, and it's so simple. It's as simple as The Monster, to be honest, in terms of structure of The Arrival, but it's a beautiful little movie. Super Cthulhu aliens. They are super monsterish. So for anyone's out there like, oh, I wonder if there's a monster. Crazy monsters. So, but coming from that, I felt like In the Wall or Beyond the Walls was a similar thing where it's really about the emotion, has a really nice payoff at the end. But I honestly felt, I watched them all last night, I felt it would have been a lot better as a short movie than a long miniseries, because I didn't know why I was watching them walk around a maze
So
half
much
the time.
of it was just watching them walk around a maze, which was at the same time, because I saw it on the screen at Beyond Fest, and seeing it on a big screen it was gorgeous because of the production design, where you're like, they had to dress every single one of these fucking rooms. Because seriously, you see them walk through thousands of rooms. But at the same time, it was just like, oh, this is kind of dragging a bit here. But the soundtrack kept me going. Hearing it in the theater, the soundtrack is really prominent there.
The biggest thing is I just didn't find it scary, and I think for me to be invested in something, it's very
You weren't scared of the creepy, like,
they're
boily
creepy
dudes?
things, but there's nothing. There's never any pulse to the scare. Nothing's ever coming for you. No one's ever really being chased. They're kind of lurking around. It never really kicks into a gear of that kind of movie to me, and that's why it just never really. It didn't fully grab me.
And the part where they went back to the house with Rose definitely like shocked me as well. That one for me was like a tense moment. But
interesting. Look, Shudder. Like, looking through Shudder, I'm excited now that I bit the bullet, and that one I think you should watch it. It just it's very Pan's Labyrinth light.
Yeah,
is what
it
I'd
is.
say. It's
It
very
is
much the
Pan's
same kind of
Labyrinth.
world.
It's like 3 episodes, right?
3 episodes are about 45 minutes. So watching it all at once maybe wasn't the right way. Probably it would have worked better, over 3 nights.
And I do have to say, there are some people who will argue that it's not quite horror, because it does have, I will say, it
fantasy,
has scares,
horror,
but it's definitely more kind of like a fantasy realm to it, where it's a whole invented universe.
It'll be somebody's favorite thing. It's got good quality. Somebody's going to watch and go, oh, I love this. It's going to be right up somebody's alley.
It was definitely, when I saw it in the theater, I left that night going like, oh my God, that was crazy. Like, I absolutely loved it right when I saw it.
I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
Stream that thing.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if you guys like The Arrival, just to plug another podcast, Eric Heiser did a great interview with Jeff Goldsmith, the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast.
Oh, yeah. Love that show.
He really dug in deep and really talked about the origins of Arrival and the problems that he had trying to get it sold, because it got turned down by a lot of studios, and he faced a lot of studio bullshit, and then finally someone stepped up, and then working with Denny. He was talking about the process working with Denny, and it's like, that sounds amazing. So
he's going to get an Oscar nomination for sure.
Yeah,
it seems like a sure thing. It's such a simple movie.
Yeah,
and it has a twist. Reason I encourage you to see it is to not miss the twist, because there's somebody had told me that, go see it before somebody ruins it, and it's such a simple thing, but it changes how you view the movie. It's great. It's really a good movie.
Yeah. For me, I picked up the Phenomenon Blu-ray that Synapse put out. They're kind of doing the whole deal with Argento's movies, and yet again, it's a, here's the deal with them. They put out a fancy steelbook version, which is usually like $50 or whatever. I always go for it because I'm a collector and I have no self-control. But inevitably, in several months, much like Tenebrae, they will put out a single disc version. But this is 3 discs. It's got the full soundtrack. It's got 3 cuts of the movie, including Creepers, which is the American 82-minute cut, the international one, and then there's one. I guess I don't know what it's referred to. It's like the super international cut, which is the longest possible version of the movie, which is 116 minutes long. That's the one I watched. I will start by saying that it looks fantastic. as always, Synapse does an amazing job restoring every freaking frame of this movie. And, just for argument's sake, I not too long ago, I'd watched my Anchor Bay DVD of it. It's not anamorphic, so it's like tiny in the middle of my screen. Putting this on, the menu is just Jennifer Connelly like swimming through the water, and it's like crystal clear and perfect. You're like, oh my God, this is great. Now, the thing about Phenomenon is interesting. And I think I might have texted Ryan as I was watching it or after. It's not good.
I love it.
The opening, I just remember the opening being like one of the greatest things.
The opening's amazing because it's like kind of a murder and a beheading, and it's
because
like
it's a girl who didn't get on the bus, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, I just remember the outdoorsiness of it.
Yeah,
all.
I remember this beautiful countryside and the mountain, and then this death.
And then just her head falling down the waterfall. And you're like, whoa, what am I watching? This is ridiculous.
It's so good.
But it's interesting because I love and respect Argento. I wrote an article on the site about that I don't give a damn that they'll remake Suspiria. I'm totally for it because the thing is this: people get uptight about remakes, but it's like I watched Suspiria recently on the big screen. No one will ever be able to make that movie again. Visually, soundtrack, everything. And it's not exactly the greatest story.
It's kind of disjointed.
Not exactly the greatest
how many great horror films are about the story?
Well, true, but that's the thing. It is unique in its own way that it is impossible to remake.
Yeah,
and that's part of the appeal of Argento movies. But unlike Tenebrae,
the question should be begged: why are you remaking it? To the person trying to remake it. It's like, what is it you're trying to capture here? I don't get it.
Well, the current one that's happening for Amazon.
Yeah,
with Tilda Swinton.
And an amazing director. He's actually a great foreign art house guy.
And they cast Jessica Harper. She's coming back for it.
But it's more like, what is he trying? Is he going for the expressionist thing, or is he going because of the murders, or did he just like the setting of a dance thing? Like, I'm very curious.
Well, and not to go on a tangent here, but I've always said one of the best remakes of Suspiria is Lucky McKee's The Woods, which just takes the basic premise and does it again. But anyway, I digress.
Oh yeah, Black Swan.
And Black Swan. I'm pretty sure that this was the first Argento movie I saw as Creepers. And I've not gone back to watch Creepers. I want to because I think that's the movie I like.
I smell an article.
No, seriously.
Smell a comparison.
Seriously, because, at 110 or 12, 16 minutes, that's a whole lot of movie, and a whole lot of it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's nice seeing Jennifer. I think the monkey thing is hilarious, and Donald Pleasance is always a
crazy insect scene with them.
But
that last crazy part where she jumps in the pool and the weird creature and the corridors.
The little boy in the last 15 minutes are just bonkers. Yeah. However, I think this may have benefited from lots of cuts. Hence, I'd like to go back and watch Creepers, which is the one I remember renting on video and kind of being my introduction in Argento's world because. Some movies don't need to be 2 hours long. Yeah. So
and
this may be one of them.
Simon Boswell's score at the end. In that final sequence, it's really cool.
Because they do that stuff and the Goblin score.
Yeah, it's a mixture. He's doing it with
them. But, regardless, if you're an Argento fan, this is a stellar release, and it looks gorgeous. It's just it's not, as I remember, one of his better films. No. So... Yeah,
I have to add that to the collection now.
Yeah, it's like you kind of have to.
I can't wait.
I have no control. I have to have a real Argento movie.
I know. I spent Thanksgiving evening the next day, just kind of going through the Alien movies again.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I started with Prometheus, went to Aliens, and then Alien. I tapped out of Alien 3. I haven't gone on to Alien Resurrection. It'll probably be sometime this weekend, but I just wanted to see them together, and I went on a roll. Like I watched Prometheus. Gave it a few hours, Alien, then Aliens back to back. And it is single-handedly one of my favorite franchises. Mm-hmm. I just remember getting the thrill of, I can watch Aliens over and over. Alien is more of, because it wasn't the first film that I watched, I have a different memory of it. So, but it's a film that ages like wine. As I get older, I start noticing not just the flaws, but the really interesting mistakes they made. So starting with Prometheus is really, Prometheus I was really hard on.
But you went backwards.
No. I started with Prometheus.
The prequel.
Yeah, because of the prequel, I just kind of wanted to go that way. Also, Prometheus, I was really, really hard on when I first saw it, and I thought it was complete garbage.
Clearly, you weren't at our screening. Everyone who went to this one screening likes it.
I loved it.
No.
I'm glad some people are, because you're not the only one. I've seen some people starting to come around, which is good because I wrote an article when we saw it, because Elric and I sat next to each other at the screening, and we came out and everybody was loving it.
Yeah, it was like
Brad Mishka
and who's the guy who's working?
Collins was with us.
It was so funny, but then suddenly you went home and everyone hated it.
Everyone hated it.
Oh, what did we just watch?
I had written an article for Fangoria after that screening about how much I absolutely loved Prometheus, and then the next day the comments were like, "Fucking piece of shit! This movie's awful.
Well,
How
expectations
fire this
are a big part
reporter?"
of it.
And I was like,
Expectations,
I actually thought it was good.
Yeah,
Well,
I enjoyed it more the second time. The first time, you cannot. It's the same with a sequel or any remake. You walk in and you have what you expect that to be.
Right.
So you're immediately thinking, well, why did they do that? Why did they do this? Whereas I remember I got the 3D Blu-ray like months later when it came out at home, and I watched it as its own science fiction movie that Ridley Scott made without thinking of Alien.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is actually pretty cool.
It's cool. It's got a ton of flaws. And unfortunately, I can't get out of my head. Someone did like a 20 things that are wrong with Prometheus, and they're all story points and not bullshit points for internet trolling. But I was like, yep, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem. But to me, Prometheus still retains that sense of wonder that you get watching Alien for the first time, because you're kind of trying to guess, where the hell this thing is going and what new horrors are in store at every turn. Like when they have that guy come back, the guy who decided to stay overnight, and he comes back and he's like all crab-like and folded up like by the ramp, and you're like, what the fuck is that?
Well, you had two
there's
great
some good stuff
characters.
there.
Like Fassbender's a great character, and so is the girl with the dragon tattoo actress.
Yeah.
Like they actually are strong. It's just that they suffer from stuff that just doesn't make sense around them.
No. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, and it's got a lot of logistical flaws.
Totally.
But it's the journey that I really, really love to partake in, and it's absolutely beautiful film. And I think every time I watch it, I delight in watching Fassbender because he's got so many little nuances. Fassbender is already ahead of everybody in this fucking movie in terms of talent. Like he is ahead of Charlize is great, but she's underused. Idris is great, but he's underused. Fassbender knows exactly what the movie he's in, and he's like, no, this is my
On
movie,
the Peter
guys.
O'Toole
This is
thing at
mine.
the start.
Oh,
it's
I
like,
love that.
gold.
His obsession with Peter
It's
O'Toole.
gold. Like
So
it's so
good.
smart the way he models himself on him.
Yeah.
But it's like the opposite of Alien. We're starting with him, knowing what he is, and seeing him design himself. Whereas in Alien, it's a surprise
absolutely.
to learn about Ash. And
then flipping over to Alien, what's interesting is because this is where Prometheus kind of got things wrong, is because Lindelof was trying to go for the kind of mundane dialogue of the crew and like kind of like the grounding it and grounding the personalities a little bit, and it felt very artificial in Prometheus. But here in Alien, these people are real. Like you get a real vibe from everybody in this film.
blue collar.
I
I think it's because you're watching them work. You're not watching them like here's character introduction. It's more like here's them doing stuff they have to do.
It's the Howard Hawks approach to directing, because what he did is he just let them talk. Like granted, it was probably scripted, but it felt very natural. So you've got Parker and Ripley and everybody just talking. And what was interesting this one time that I didn't pick up on, there's a moment where Ripley is talking through the mic, talking to somebody on the other side of the ship, and the editor cut her line in half, so it's on somebody else, and then we cut to her. But her part of it, her line almost feels clipped and really raw. It feels like raw sound. And I was like, that's got to be a mistake. But they left it in there, and it feels so real.
Feels real, yeah.
Aliens is still amazing. Aliens is fantastic. And then flipping to that kind of sense of wonder and excitement and fun that I had watching Prometheus, by the time I got to Alien 3, I was like, yo, this is a total disappointment.
I have something to tell.
Yeah.
I have something to say about that.
Yeah.
And this is something I've adopted maybe in the last year or two, which is, I do the same thing that you just did, which is I'll start a series with Alien and then be like, all right, I got to go to Aliens and then keep going. But with the Alien franchise in particular, I get so frustrated by 3 that I just give up. And the thing is, maybe it was like 2 years ago when I think we had Charles de Lazaric on our show. I'm like, you know what? I know Alien and Aliens so well. I don't need to watch those again. I went straight to Alien 3 Director's Cut with no context or reference. And you know what? I kind of liked it on its own as a sci-fi movie. Because look, if you watch 2 movies and you've got 3 to 4 hours of attachment to all these characters, seeing them all die at the opening is just, you're like, oh, fuck this movie. Yeah. But if you watch it as if you've never seen an Alien movie before, Alien 3 opens with, okay, you're on a colony, a ship crashes, one person survives. You don't know who that one person is. If you kind of follow it as its own Alien movie, I definitely was able to get into a lot more judging it on its own.
Sure.
Well, it's also great actors, great performances.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
The
so
world
there's
feels real.
things about it
gritty.
that's interesting, but it's not a great follow-up to 1 and 2.
Yeah, I mean,
Much that way.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I mean, like applying that kind of principle of letting it stand on its own, you can't. It comes with the baggage.
It's
of
still
the other
in the
films,
universe.
Yeah, no matter what.
Yeah. And I just felt like, kind of getting through it, by the time they got to the we need to chase it into the lead tunnel kind of thing, I was just like, I'm out. I'm not even excited because this is not a chase sequence. There are no stakes at play.
Mm-hmm.
I know Ripley's going to die. I know that Charles Dutton's going to die. I know like everybody's going to wind up dying by the end, you know. And it's just a grim, really bummer of a movie.
Yeah, it really is.
And I love the color palette. I remember being super stoked when I was a teenager when it came out because I was like, yeah, nihilistic, I don't care, everything sucks.
I actually really liked 3 when it came out, when I saw it in the theater, and I was like, it's set in a prison. They have to shave their heads because the lice. And I thought it was just like,
and also like
badass.
and also like, I think Fincher just fucking hated everybody in the movie. Like attempting to rape Ripley and like it's just like, dude.
Well, it's a prison. Dark.
No.
But beyond that, Ripley's like sleeping with that doctor dude for like,
which seems really weird
really
too.
off character.
Her.
Yeah, because watching her, I mean,
You mean
like
the Game of Thrones guy.
but watching her, you know, in the first one, it's like Ripley taking control because Dallas sucks. Yeah. Dallas, you know, he's a good, cool guy and cool character, but he's the weakest of the bunch, you know, and he's and then in the second one, obviously Ripley's like begrudgingly dragged back in, and she's like, oh, fine, I got to take control again. And then to have her like come to this prison planet, and then she's like, "Yo, you wanna fuck?"
Yeah,
and
it's
like
weird.
Really, that's what's on her mind right now.
But for the first 2, she was not in any way a sexualized being. I mean, they still put her in underwear and a tank top because they have to, but she was not a sexualized.
So you
being.
think by that decision was for her to kind of like empower herself in this colony of men? Is that what you're like, the decision to go?
But they make her look just like the rest of them. They shave her down, so they all it's still keeping her pretty, you know.
They still keep her gender neutral, but the fact that all of a sudden, after these 2 films where she has been in charge of all the situations and very unsexual, for her to suddenly be like, let's fuck. It doesn't work.
The problem is you can't actually analyze. This is the problem with analysis. We want to analyze it like a good movie. The problem is, it isn't a whole movie. It's a totally fractured freak show because of all the writer exits and stuff. So there's
which
no
is probably why those things exist.
Exactly. There's no way to really see it as what it could. I mean, under Vincent Ward, who knows what it would have been.
As impossible as it is, I know you have to consider it. But again, that was the way I enjoyed it the most. Because like if I don't know Ripley, then that's not a weird decision to me watching the movie.
Yeah.
That said, when you do get to Resurrection, think of this. First of all, because I'm actually like, I've turned around so hardcore in that movie for a very simple reason.
He's a Resurrection fan.
I'm a huge fan. So let some time go.
Watch Amelie, then jump right into Resurrection. It's a great double feature.
Watch the director's cut, because the director's cut sets there's an additional opening that literally it's like it makes me laugh thinking about it. It's like it looks like the mouth of an alien. It's like a monster. It's a close up and it opens and it backs up and it's a fly and then it splats on the front of the ship and you're like, what the hell am I watching? And that sets up the tone of that movie.
It always felt like a Joss Whedon fan film.
But that's what it is. If you know who Joss Whedon is now and know his humor, you watch it that way. To me, it's like it's what your memory of the Alien franchise is movie. If you haven't watched them in a long time and you just watch that one, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool.
So this is my
totally fan film.
So this is my proposal for a bonus episode, because I've been really kind of getting into it. I think that I would love to discuss the kind of comic book sequels that came out of stuff, because I still have the Dark Horse Aliens first series.
And Alien vs. Predator had good comics.
Alien vs. Predator.
The Predator vs. Batman was really good, like a long time ago.
Oh, no, that was good. But they did, Dark Horse did The Thing, which was like a direct follow-up to John Carpenter's film. And John Carpenter actually came out and was like, if I did a sequel, it would be that comic book.
Oh, I want to read that.
So you need to pitch the Predator versus Purge comic book.
Yeah, that might actually be something you can make a deal of. I'm in.
All right, one more from Bekah.
Let's see here. What else did I check out? So I watched Eyes of My Mother.
Oh,
which you have seen.
I have.
That is coming out in a couple of weeks from Magnolia.
Yep. It's actually next, not this Friday, but next Friday. It'll be in theaters here at the New Art and on VOD.
I was going to say, I don't think it's doing a big theatrical.
No, it'll be like
which once you
Lemley
see it,
type
it's
thing,
kind of like, why? The film, I loved the plot and I loved what it was trying to do and I loved what it did. But for me, there was something weird about the filmmaking, not the filmmaking as a craft, but like the way that the film was shot. And you need to watch it, Elric, because I want somebody else to see
this. This is the one
Ryan
I wanted to see most this year. I've been waiting all year. I had the guy was going to come in, but it was often we try to get a guest who's from out of town. We'll talk to a publicist and they'll give us like 2 days to squeeze someone in. It just doesn't work out. So he was one of those. It looks like it was shot in black and white, like monochrome.
It was shot in black and white, which I was totally good with because the black and white, it looks beautiful. And because the film starts in, I guess it's supposed to be about the 50s or 60s. It definitely does not adhere itself to a time period. You're just supposed to get that it's old timey.
Yeah.
And it's set on a farm, and they definitely don't have a lot of modern things, so you
They're
don't
Amish.
really that's it, it's Amish.
An Amish horror film.
So you don't really get a time frame, but you can assume it's about the 50s or 60s. So the black and white actually kind of worked for most of the film, and then it follows her as she grows up, and again it stays timeless, so the black and white really worked with it. But what kind of was weird for me is while you were looking at this very simplistic art horror plot about this girl, her mother's a surgeon who has come to the U.S. And so even as a young girl, they're like dissecting like cows' eyeballs and things like that because her mom would just show her how to do it. So she has a very interesting, weird take on death. And you see how that kind of evolves as people die in her life and how it kind of manifests itself. And so that part was really cool. But then there was something with the filmmaking that made me constantly aware I was watching a movie. And it's the first time I've had that in a long time, where usually I get really absorbed in whatever I'm watching, because that's what you do when you watch a movie. And there was something with the filmmaking where I was constantly aware of the camera. And I don't have that often.
Something artificial about it.
Yeah. I need somebody else to watch it
I'm
that can
excited
talk
to
to
see
me
it.
about it. Because
I saw it back in January, so my memory, it was the actress and the emotion of what was going on with her and the kind of like disturbing nature of the plot that that outweighed the visual style and the aesthetic of it all. So maybe
That's funny though, because
that's
everything
where
I
it
hear
gets
about it is
weird.
everyone raving about the visual style. Like
And
all
no-
the reviews say mesmerizing visual.
And the visuals, like when you're looking at an actual frame of footage, you're like, holy shit, this is beautiful. But there was just something that, and it was this weird juxtaposition because it is so emotional, and you are with, there's only like 4 actors in the whole movie. You are with this one girl the entire time. Completely emotionally invested in her,
Just
but
don't
there
tell me
was
what she
still,
does. I don't
I'm
know
not,
that
I'm
part.
not mentioning that.
I need
but
some
there
mystery.
is,
I'm
there
raising
is
my
still
eyebrows going,
something. There is still something there that even though that I was completely with her and following her and emotionally invested, that I was still just like, oh, there's a camera there. And it's weird. So I need somebody else to see it
there's
with that
literally
in
a
mind.
camera there. No, I'm kidding.
No,
So
definitely.
that was Eyes of My Mother. But I still recommend horror film fans check it out. I will say it is a slow burn, but
It's artsy. It's artsy.
Yeah, it's really
fancy
artsy.
Kind of
horror.
right
But
up your
even
alley.
I
though
won't like it then.
it's artsy fartsy, I liked this one. Like I really liked what they were trying to do. I just the camera thing. I'm trying to tease
right.
it out.
All right, I'll wait till I see it. And then one last thing, I heard a podcast that was Dick Renner said, "Yeah, you listen." I think it's on the Fangoria network or whatever, called the Splatcast. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't crazy about the way that kind of the host and the sound quality. There's a lot of things, but the interview itself, it's with Perry Blackshear, the guy who did They Look Like People, and it was so freaking inspiring. It's about like, hey, no one's done anything since film school. We're all waiting for that big thing. Hey, this is made for under $10,000. Let's just make a movie with my 2 friends acting in it, and it was so because I really like that movie, and I think
I love that movie a lot.
it's going to make my top 10. It's one of those movies that it's like it's so close to almost being great.
Max
But
Landis called it like the greatest film of
Max
the year.
Landis can eat shit. I mean,
I just saw that on
Future
Twitter.
guest Max
Jen.
Landis.
Max Landis called me boy once, so he can suck it. I could care less.
What do you mean, boy?
Yeah, boy. It wasn't in a fun way either. But no, really, it was a really inspiring. If you're looking for that like conversation where a guy's just like they did it because out of pure passion, and the way he says at a certain point, it's like even if I made a studio film or something bigger now, I would come back and do another one of these with my friends because you're doing it for the complete right reason. It is just to do it because you want to make this little story and telling you don't care if it hits or makes an audience. It doesn't matter. And it was really great. It's great. I just love that movies can still be made that way more than ever. We're in a time now where anyone could do that.
Yeah.
Just don't, you have to be realistic about where it's going to land.
Right.
You know,
And
they-
smart about it.
Smart
like
about it,
you
yeah.
can't just
Well, you have
go
to have
into
good
it
taste.
with no script or
You know?
anything like that.
You have to have taste at a certain point to make something that will connect to festival and that you can't just,
Yeah. No, that is a good one.
Yeah. So anyway, that's called the Splatcast. That's worth checking out. And the last thing, I did the it's been a couple weeks, so it feels like it's been forever. But after my Tension experience, I did something called Delusion,
Oh,
the
yeah,
Crimson
yeah,
Queen.
yeah.
I can't believe you're getting into these.
Well, this I wouldn't even put them in the same genre. I mean, I got to say, with Tension, he did something that I've never really experienced, very unique, pushing your buttons, comfort level.
You
stuff
got
like that.
naked.
Yeah, I got naked, and naked girls rubbed my shoulders. But with this, Delusion was much more like walking around an actual theater, like for real, a theater show. happening in an actual old, looked like a haunted house for real, in the middle of, where was it? It was near USC, so quite far downtown. I found the experience really interesting, but way, way, way less satisfying. Like, I didn't think about it again. Whereas Tension, everyone, after doing it, talks about it and they compare their experiences. This was much more like, yeah, that was a nice vampire play that we saw. It's up close, so it feels real to an extent, but
it's
it is
more passive experience as opposed to being
totally
a part of it,
passive.
Right?
You occasionally get asked a question, but they don't want you to really mess up the script, you know? And I've heard that this wasn't one of their best plays. Like, I've heard that it's not as good as previous years, but the location is so cool. And what I'm interested about this, and Ryan's been doing these things for much longer than I have, these kind of experiential horror kind of theme things, is what's so cool though is just being physically in a place. And being close to things happening, it is really unique. And I am definitely hooked on that side of it. Like next year, I'll pre-plan my Halloween around these things now.
Oh, wow.
Do a couple, but I'm not at the
going
point where I'm
full
going
eyes
to do.
wide shut.
I'm not going to go full torture. I'm not interested in going to get hurt or anything.
Right.
So anyway, if people, I'm sure that will come across next year. Delusion will do a new play. Definitely worth checking out, though. It's
Very
fun.
cool. So just to prep you guys for the next episode, we've got some special guests coming in for part 2 of this. Involved in the show, Channel Zero, Candle Cove, which is on SyFy now. I just finished all 6 episodes. And it was great. It was really interesting. Some really scary stuff in there. And
I actually
fascinating.
had nightmares about it, like where I
love that Dave freaks out about the tooth monster like I do.
Creepy.
Oh my God! No, it got to the point where I was
visual.
taking pictures as soon as the tooth monster would come on screen. I'd turn and try to capture his picture because he would just cringe up and his eyes would get shifty. And
It just felt like a great indie horror film.
Yeah.
It felt
It did.
It
did.
It didn't feel safe. It took risks.
It didn't even answer all the questions.
No, it didn't answer all the questions.
Yeah.
It felt very fever dream-like, but it had a great motor that kept you coming back episode after episode.
Yeah.
I don't think
it was great.
I don't think there'll be a lot of spoilers in that one, but I do think you should at least watch the first couple.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
start.
If you can watch it. Otherwise, we're going to delve into kind of how the show came to be, because obviously it's based on a creepypasta, so I'm fascinated about
And
that aspect.
you can learn about the creepypasta that it comes from the Candle Cove creepypasta on the Blumhouse website. If you just go on and search Candle Cove, it'll come right up.
Way too lazy for that. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to ask that very question.
Listen.
Good article.
John, before we go, anything you want to ask us before we tune out here? This is your last chance. You're in the room,
Yeah,
buddy.
John, you're in it.
What have you always wanted to know about us?
He's been in the trenches with us. He knows
Yeah,
all.
he knows
He knows our deep and dark
everything.
secrets.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. I mean, I've been knowing you guys for.
Yeah, this is like our
Then
third
just say
year.
something nice to us. No, I'm just kidding.
Call Elric boy. Do it.
Let us thank you, John, sincerely
Yes.
for all your help.
Yes.
Because
Yes,
the
we
people
love
who
you,
do
John.
things for us for nothing, it's crazy generous of your time, and you're a great guy. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
You guys
Love
are
you for
welcome.
it.
Yeah, that's
Thank
awesome.
you, listeners.
Thank you, listeners.
Yes.
See you next time.
Keep rating, reviewing.
All right. Welcome to the Monday edition of Shockwaves. I'm here with Mr. Rob G.
What's up?
Elric.
Who's got
Kane.
his finger in my mouth as I'm chewing on it as he sleeps. It's super creepy.
Oh my God.
Might be a reference to
So
something
many
coming out.
Okay, and let's
so
move
many
on to
cheeks.
Rebekah
He's
McKendry.
laughed. He's laughed.
Can I get the
Jeez.
title one more time?
Hang
Just
on,
one more.
let's go back one more time. Hang on. I'm sitting here with Mr. Rob G.
Hi, I'm not going to be disruptive.
Doc.
Doc.
Rebekah
That's all I
McKendry.
get.
Dr. Rebekah
Can I get the
McKendry.
McKendry?
Never
Yeah.
forget
And
There we go.
Elric Kane.
Troublemaker.
Elric Shobo Kane.
I'm the only one who doesn't get a
Wild
paycheck
card
from this
Kane.
thing.
So I'm really, really excited about this episode because if you've been listening to the show and since I've kind of come back and inserted myself back into the show, I've been talking about a series that I am absolutely in love with that I find is unsafe television, really creepy television, and I hope you guys all tuned in for it during its run on SyFy. It's called Channel Zero, and they began with a story called Candle Cove, which is all derived from creepypasta stories. I have in the house Mr. Nick Antosca.
Hey.
And Harley Peyton.
Hi there. Just happy to be here.
We'll be getting back into their kind of backgrounds and where they came from and stuff like that. But first off, gentlemen, congratulations on the show's run. You've definitely disturbed me, which is very hard to do. And Nick, you've been getting, love letters from me from work every single day going, dude, this episode, dude, that episode, what the heck?
Keep them coming.
No. It's really, really a solid show. And of course, everybody here at Shockwaves, the team here, we all caught up on all 8 episodes.
Six.
Sorry, I'm like thinking of another.
Seemed like
You loved it so much.
This is very suspicious.
6.
You got extra.
I watched the first episode more than once because I felt like I was missing. I was
It
missing
was a
things
very
as I went.
dense episode.
Yeah.
The first episode was very
They are.
dense. Yeah.
Well,
it's
the first cut of the first episode came in at 85 minutes.
Oh my God, that's like a movie, guys.
42-minute show.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, it felt very dreamlike. We were. I watched it with my girlfriend, and first 5 minutes, I was like, wait a minute, did we just see what? There was a burning guy? What happened? What's going on? Okay, this is the rhythm of the show.
Teeth.
Time to readjust and kind of get into it.
Somehow I tricked them into letting me put my nightmares on the SyFy channel.
Yeah.
It's really it really feels like a victory.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be subjected to my weird nightmare
Yeah,
shit.
no,
It
you
works.
guys, you guys won. You
Is
guys
that a
won.
hard sell at a network? Because I have never seen anything on SyFy that I know there are new shows that are actually like 12 Monkeys and
The Expanse was really
there's
good.
a zombie thing right now that a lot of people are watching that they like.
Z Nation.
But see, I've never watched anything, and so it was a harder sell initially for me. And once I watched the first one, it's my favorite television show of the year, like flat out. Like Exorcist has been great, but this is my favorite show.
Our goal was to break you in.
All right, you did it. You did it. I'm still not watching Sharknado. I don't care what you do.
All right, well, just kind of getting into it, just respectively, why don't you guys tell us a little bit where you came from? Harley, obviously, you're a veteran of TV.
Yeah.
You came from some titles like Twin Peaks,
a little
show called Twin Peaks
yeah.
that, had no influence on any of us whatsoever.
It could have been our biggest fanboy moment when we looked you up when he said who was coming with Nick, and I looked up your name and I went,
cool.
oh my god.
Twin Peaks. Yeah. That was...
Usually I talk to people who they loved it when their older brother was watching it when they were 10.
Yeah, that's true.
So I was a prodigy, thank God. So that was
It was my parents who were watching it, and I would see it as a kid and think, like, is this what the adult world is like?
right.
So thank you, Harley.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So Harley, you came up as a writer first, or
Yeah, I actually came to town and was a script reader. Mm-hmm. And so I was an independent reader, so I worked for various companies, and I would literally walk onto the lot, walk off with like 20 scripts, and go home and bitterly read them and write sort of sarcastic, synopses and comments. Yeah. And I got more and more kind of cruel as I did it, and then finally got.
So basically, you were an internet critic.
I was.
First wave of trolldom.
I was an internet critic well before the internet existed. And that's basically what I did. And then I got a job for a producer as sort of the assistant or whatever, and it was terrible, and I got fired. And wrote a script, and then things followed.
What was that first script?
Yeah.
It's called Bobby Swan. Uh-huh. And it was Romeo and Juliet in New York, and I'd been in New York twice. And at the time, people said, wow, your sense of the city is so amazing. Never, obviously, it was, but it was a very long time ago. Yeah, I wrote the first script and got an agent, and then just got lucky.
Yeah.
And did you do Less Than Zero before or after Twin Peaks?
That was before.
Right.
And did that come from knowing?
That was my second job.
Wow. Did you know Brett Easton Ellis?
I met him a couple times. He wanted to know mostly about casting. Because there was a huge battle between that and Bright Lights Big City, and so we were all fighting for the same actors.
Yeah.
And so he was very nice, and I always thought very kind.
Yeah.
We were all sort of disappointed in a way when the movie came out, although it's aged a lot better than I thought.
And it's got some good performance. Robert Downey
It's got some
Jr.
amazing.
really anchors it.
Downey was, come on.
Yeah.
It's also like quintessential 80s now. So
It is. It's settled nicely. Yeah, Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
That was when Rick Rubin, put together, Slayer. And a couple hip hop songs, and kind of changed things.
Yeah.
That was amazing. It was really fun.
Yeah, I want the one Twin Peaks thing I'm curious is just how you get into that world, because it's so Frost Lynch created, right? And how did you enter into that? Not just getting the gig, but how do you assimilate to a world that's already being built like that?
A lot of us were from the Northwest, and I'm from Spokane, Washington, and I knew that part of the country really well. David lived in Sandpoint, Idaho for a while. which is sort of a white supremacist ski resort area. and so
I love how that's a crossover.
So, it's like Mark Furman moved there.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Ski Nazis must die.
Making it.
It was. I knew Mark sort of socially. It was one of those great things where he said, "You want to come see a pilot that I did with David Lynch?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I watched it and saw him in the lobby and said, "I've never written television before, but I'll do it for free if that's what it takes." And so he got me a script and liked it so much, and I wrote another, and then you're just off to the races. But I found the world very easy to kind of slip into.
Yeah,
it was nice.
It's amazing. And Nick,
now
you and I met when you were over on Hannibal.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then we became Twitter pals,
right?
And then you wrote Friday the 13th, and then we became real good pals.
We met at Bryan Fuller's house for the series finale of Hannibal, and you said, "Are you Nick Antosca, because your Twitter thing is it was like a drawing, so like you couldn't quite
I can't
recognize.
really tell.
You're like the symbol of Nick.
Is it your avatar?
Well, at that time it was a drawing of me. Yeah. Now it's just a drawing of my cat.
Yeah.
So now people really can't recognize.
That's so layered.
That means you've made it when you can do that.
But yeah, that was. At the time we met, I think I had just sold Candle Cove. Or I think I had... No, that's right. I had just sold Candle Cove and was writing the outline for the pilot and would spend the summer, doing that and getting into the script. Mm-hmm. And then it got greenlit right after that. So 6 months later, I met Harley... And a week later, we were in the room, and that was less than a year ago. Amazing. So this happened very quickly.
Yeah, wow. And where are you from originally?
I'm from New Orleans. Yeah. And this was, in the 80s when New Orleans was like one of the murder capitals of the country. It was a really bad place to raise a kid. So my parents got out of there. I grew up on the East Coast, then came out here. I started as a novelist, fiction writer. Came out here because you can't make a living as a short story fiction writer, novelist, now I'm like a TV animal.
Yeah. Whenever I read Stephen King growing up, I was like, I'm going to be a novelist. I'm going to make tons of money. I'm going to be super tortured.
That is the only novelist who makes a living is Stephen King.
And he's always writing about successful novelists. And you're like,
where are those guys?
Yeah.
Or, Jack Torrance, where you're like, man, Stephen King, like, stop picking on this guy. He's this poor, struggling novelist.
I know. So tell us a little bit about the kind of like origins of Channel Zero. Obviously creepypastas have been around. To me, being honest, like there's a weird kind of generational disconnect because I never really never latched onto them. I never knew what they were. When somebody first introduced the word creepypasta, I was like, what the hell is that? Is there like creepypasta?
It's the biggest thing on our website, and I still don't 100% understand it.
It's an unfortunate name.
Yeah, I have done so much research on these things simply because they are the number one thing on our website. Like the fans of the Blumhouse website love creepypastas, and no matter we put them up, like something goes up almost daily that's creepypasta oriented just because they do so well for us.
And do you guys know the origin of why it's called creepypasta?
Yes.
Yes. Copy and paste, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Just for listeners who don't know, it comes from the word copypasta, which is a phrase that refers to like random bits of junk, anecdotes or language or whatever that was copied and pasted from message board to message board or whatever. And then people would write scary stories and they would get copied and pasted if they were really good. And so people started calling it creepypasta, which is a really unfortunate name because it suggests it's silly. It suggests that they're not, it doesn't sound scary.
Yeah, the majority of them originated on a Reddit board. The No Sleep board was like one of the first ones, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually... It's kind of a chicken and the egg thing for me because I've heard people say that, but I don't know if creepypasta was the thing before No Sleep or if it's the other way around.
Yeah,
I
or
don't
if
know
that's
the answer.
Just where they were all collected. I have no idea which one came first, but yeah, that it was that Reddit, the No Sleep board seemed to be where they were getting collected. Yeah. I'll say that's where people were first seeing them all in one location.
The No Sleep board, I will say, is a place that I've gone to many times in the last year or so just to keep up to date on the new ones. and take kind of deep dives into creepypasta / no sleep archives.
You got to spend some time on the Blumhouse site.
Yeah. I have.
We put up like 3 a week.
I believe me, I've seen a lot of the stuff that you guys have put up, including the stuff about this show. So, much appreciated.
So for you, I mean, like, where did the show come from? Did you guys think seasonal anthology to begin with? Was it a traditional anthology?
Yeah, it really began with, for me, I just got a call from my manager who said, have you ever heard of Candle Cove? Which I was like, yeah, what's going on? Tell me more. I had been a casual reader of creepypasta for a while. I certainly read Candle Cove, Russian Sleep Experiment, all the big ones, lots of the little ones. I'd also read some things that I didn't even know were creepypasta, like it's often known as the Dancing Man story, which is just an anecdote about a guy who, likes to take long walks in the city at night, which incidentally is something that I like to do, and all insomniacs do. It turned out that Max Landis, who I had worked with on something else that was never made, had optioned the Candle Cove story, which is by Chris Straub, and it's, of course, a series of message board posts. It's not an obvious thing that you would adapt.
Right.
And I think they had talked about doing a feature version and it hadn't gone forward. And so I came up with, pitch for a mini-series of Candle Cove, but I also said, wait a second, this is obviously not a long-running TV series. Like, it's very hard to make that message board, something that could run for 50 episodes or something. But there's a million of these stories, and they're the modern urban legends. They're kind of under the radar, but they do have all these fans. You got YouTube videos of people just reading them with no video that have 3 million, 4 million viewers.
Mr. Creepypasta.
Mr.
I saw him
Creepypasta.
live, and all he did was read the stories.
You saw him live?
I saw him live.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
It is
That
a
was
thing.
It's like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Where did you see him live?
Phoenix Comic-Con. Yeah, he packed the hall. Like over 2,000 people showed up, and he literally read stories off a piece of paper. And I was like, wow, it's like a whole generational thing.
Good for him, man.
This is your audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I follow him on Twitter. I watch his stuff.
What of the, because I didn't, watching it, because I had heard it was a creepypasta, but when I watched it, at no point did I feel like I didn't know that connection. I just am watching a great little story.
Yeah.
I have no idea it's coming from a urban tale or myth.
What is Candle Cove?
So what is the Candle Cove story? Yeah,
That's the thing. It's got to stand on its own, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just rely on the fans of creepypasta. At the same time, you sure better honor the fans of the creepypasta, and you better honor the original story. And that's kind of the mandate in making this show. And I knew at the beginning that there was a wealth of material there, right? Like there were all these stories, and the scary thing about committing to something like that is some of these stories we don't know who the authors are, and so we can't adapt those. Like you have to bring the authors into it, you have to give them credit, and you have to honor their work. So we've got a list at this point of ones that we really like that we can track the authorship of, and I hope that we get any season. I have no idea.
But how, and I've actually wrote an article about this on the site. How do you do that? Because usually as soon as one person will post the story, at least 7 more people add to it and build on the story. So doesn't it become, how do you kind of discern, even if there's one original author, do you then have to go through and say, okay, well, everything else that was added to it, we can't even look at it because we can't have it in?
That is exactly what we say.
Okay.
So I've never read either the sequels to Candle Cove. Well, I don't think Chris wrote any sequels to Candle Cove. Chris just wrote Candle Cove.
So that's you have tracked Candle Cove to one person.
Oh yeah, everybody knows
Okay.
where there you can usually track the original post, and in fact, Candle Cove itself has a really interesting provenance because it was never supposed to be a creepypasta. He wrote it as a short story, which is in his book of short stories, which is very good. You should track it down. It's on Amazon. And somebody, because it's in the form of a message board post, copied it and pasted it into Reddit or wherever, anonymously, without crediting him. And so it went viral because of that, because it kind of allowed people to say, the anonymity allowed people to say, oh, wow, like maybe this is a real thing. Maybe this is a real message board transcript. And then eventually it was credited back, like somebody said, like, no, this is Chris Straub's story from his book. Right. And of course, Chris, as an author, is like, but also recognizes the sort of, that is the reason that the story has gone so viral and had such an effect on people.
And you bring up something really interesting about the creepypastas, that every single one of them, one of the most through lines throughout all of them is that they're real. And they're always presented as being real. So even if you're looking at something that is not real, like the Russian sleep experiment, or I read one a couple of weeks ago where they actually pulled an image from an Apex Twins video. Yeah. And I'm staring at it and they're like, science experiment. And I'm like, that's the Apex Twins video. But it's kind of in this realm of the real.
Right. In fact, on No Sleep, on the front page, it says, the rules for the forum, one of them is do not disrupt the supposed reality.
Yeah,
of the story.
Don't dispel the myth in any capacity. That'll get you kicked off the board really quick. Yeah. I've seen some people because they will come at you as soon as you try to dispel the myth, and then you'll be removed.
Yeah, even if you're the author, like you're not allowed to say, I wrote this for English class.
Or I got this picture from this site and things like that.
What were the key elements of the Candle Cove story though for you that stood out, that made you think it could be something bigger? Like, was it because I haven't read the thing. Did they have pirates? Did they have was it about a kids television show that was imagined?
It's about the kids TV show. So the structure is it's just a series of posts and people saying, do you remember this show? Oh yeah, I remember that show. It had that creepy pirate who was gnashing his teeth, and God, he was called the Skin Taker. How could that have been real? Like, who made that show? And it's just asking questions. Then the punchline at the end of the show, or at the end of the story, is I asked my mom about that show I used to watch, and she said, oh, wasn't it cute you made up that story and you used to watch Static? So that's the twist at the end of the pilot. Like, you can't drag that twist out for 6 episodes. It doesn't work. And the things that made Candle Cove work so well to adapt are both the core concept of the TV show, right? Because the TV show is the one thing in Chris's story that is described very distinctly. We translated that pretty faithfully. And the fact that it's so open-ended, right? Like, creatively, that gives you a lot of room to build new stuff. So you just have to, while bringing your own creative voice to it, honor the spirit of what's on the page. Like, the goal was to make it feel the same, even if we had to invent new stuff to fill the world.
Now, talk about just kind of getting under the dramatic hood, and Harley, how you... Can you talk about just like in terms of the collaboration process? Because you had your writer's room, you had Don Mancini on, and who else am I forgetting? Who else was part of the team?
So it was me, Harley, Don, Katie Gruhl, staff writer, Erica Sala, who is a playwright from New York, her first show. Both of them fantastic. And then a couple of our assistants wrote scripts too. Mallory Westfall and Angel Varick Aguilar also wrote scripts.
That's awesome. And just talk about the kind of collaboration process. Again, kind of finding the motor for it, finding the character of Mike Painter, and
we had this great pilot. That's all the stuff you just talked about. I had no idea about any of that. For me, it was like this friend of mine, Cole Haddon, who I worked with on Dracula, said there's this really cool pilot, and you got to meet this guy, Nick Antosca. I think they're looking for somebody. That's sort of when I came in. So my first exposure to it wasn't the creepypasta; it was through a really great pilot script. And so for me, that's the job. And so you have this room, which wasn't that big. It was kind of great. Most rooms I've been in have been a lot bigger, and it's a lot harder to kind of get people to kind of get their ideas kind of out, I think, sometimes. And also, as you said, Mallory and Angel were empowered to kind of contribute in ways that usually the writer assistant speaks once a month. Maybe, and it's, you want fries? And so but in this case, we had all these great voices in this really wonderful room that was small enough that was really light in its feet. It was great to work with.
It was a very egalitarian room. For me, it was particularly exciting to be working with people like Harley and Don, who are horror legends, and bring, when you think about their, Twin Peaks and Child's Play, those are two things that are very relevant to this show about puppets in this small, eerie town. And so that was, a pleasure and really exciting. And the three of us co-wrote the finale, which was great. And it was kind of a thing in putting the room together. You have to, particularly, this is my first show as a showrunner.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And often they will, first-time showrunners will be disempowered because nobody knows, like, if you're a maniac or if you have any managerial skills, which writers don't usually have. Right. And the first thing I was doing was looking for upper-level producers who had a lot of experience, were great writers. And our mutual friend Cole Haddon said to me, like, Dracula was a wild production, and I had this great writer, and he was a great producer, and like you should meet him. So Harley was the first on board, and it was 4 or 5 months in the room. Yeah. Like you spend that much time in a room with people, like they got to be awesome people.
Yeah.
And this was, it was an amazing writer's room.
And at what point did Craig McNeil, the director, come on board, and what was the decision in terms of letting him direct the entire season, much like True Detective?
Yeah, so when we pitched the show, like we didn't know it was going to be 6 episodes. It could have been 10, it could have been 12. And when we got the order for 2 seasons of 6 episodes each, that was when I knew that we would be able to do 1 director per season. Because 8 episodes is tough. Yeah. Like 10 episodes is almost impossible unless you're like Soderbergh. Right. But 6 episodes is the perfect amount of material and time. And I thought it would be really cool to do something that I haven't seen too much on TV, which is, really, I can't think of another show that does it. Like True Detective, if they had continued after their first season, would have been doing it. But make every season a showcase for a really exciting directorial voice, right? And bring people who, wouldn't otherwise be hired by network, people with like one kind of auteur festival film, and people who might not otherwise really want to do TV. Yeah. So I had to, I'd seen Craig's film The Boy, which is a brilliant film.
The Spectrovision movie.
It's a good movie. Thank you for pointing that out, because there are 2 of The Boys, much to Craig's chagrin.
We love both.
Yeah, we like both.
The one with the real boy and the one with the doll boy.
And we wish they were a crossover, but anyway.
Same universe.
Craig's film is not a film that like looks great on your resume for directing TV. Sure. Right? It's meditative, it's beautiful. Not a lot happens in a traditional sense, but it is terrifying. It's full of dread. And I wanted this to be a kind of beautiful horror show, not like a grimy horror show. I wanted it to have atmosphere and art and a real cinematic voice. So I sat down with Craig, who kind of said, well, honestly, do I really want to do this? Like, I like the script. I really like the script. And I'm just like, do they want the version of this script that I want to make? And so we kind of talked about like what the show looks like. Like, and he was like, how do you see these puppets when they show up in real life? And I was like, well, we don't see them a lot. Yeah. And when we see them, we don't see a lot of them. So like picture, the woods in the frame, and it's beautiful and pastoral. And then over here in the corner, you see like a little tooth child peeking out, or like a life-size puppet or something. And that's really what he shot. It's a show that feels grounded in reality visually, and that makes the horror more unsettling. So, we said from the beginning, like, we're not going to do jump scares. Like, that's not what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. It feels it's fancy horror, which you don't get a lot of.
It's fancy.
Well, if you want to put it that way.
No, it totally is. Just because, like, you could look at the spectrum of films coming out theatrically. In the horror scene, you've got The Witch, and then you've got, kind of like the in-your-face scare fest, and then the TV spectrum, Hannibal was a balance of both, I felt. It was a little bit of gore. It was a Grand Guignol kind of experiment.
Hannibal is Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's what I think of it. Like that kind of horror.
Totally. But you look at, there's The Exorcist, there's A Strain, there's like, and then in comes along this like this slithering kind of weird show called Channel Zero, and you're like, oh, the jump scares, they creep up on you.
But Twin Peaks had I think it's very similar, because I actually thought for the first time we see Bob in the pilot, I had a very similar effect to seeing the tooth child the first time, because it was you reveal him in a similar way. It's not as a jump scare, it's as a reveal that becomes a jump, because it's so unexpected and kind of, like you said, it's always subtly grounded in the background of a scene, or it's just but I also think the settings look similar. Not locations per se, but the way they're shot, the way it is allowed to take its time, which is surprising.
Doing it, I never thought of that a single time.
Yeah.
We're going through the process, right? And then I saw the first few episodes, and I went, oh wait, right? And it was, because it's in the same world in a way, or it has that same vibe, I guess. But also, don't underestimate the fact that Nick got anyone to hire either of the directors we worked with is so astonishing to me. Because they just don't do that, and they deserve credit for being pushed in that direction or being accepting of it, because that's a jump and a leap of faith that studios and networks, SyFy I would say in particular, but whomever, they don't do that. They just don't hire guys like that to direct pilots.
When we were selling the show, it was you go out and pitch and you try to get a bidding war going, right? And we had a number of different places that bid for the show. And SyFy was not necessarily the place we had gone out and said, I hope we sell this to SyFy. And there were, we basically had decided to go somewhere else. And the president of SyFy called me without knowing that and made the case for why we should take it to SyFy. And I was like, when I got off the phone, I was like, shit. I think we're taking it to SyFy.
Well, without going, are you allowed to say like what the case was? I mean,
Like what was SyFy trying to do?
We want to make Distills. Basically, we want to make classy stuff, and we get the vision that you pitched. We want to make the phrase that they use, in like executive code is elevated. We want to make elevated horror, and then when we got a little further down the road, and we're talking about like actual visual comps, the stuff that I would say to them so that we could kind of get in the same headspace was actually, think about The Witch. Think about another really big influence on it was The Returned, the French horror show, which is one of my favorite modern shows. And it's just masterfully done. It has that restraint. It's beautiful. There's a British show called Southcliffe, which is not a horror show, but that actually had some visual influence on Channel Zero, and both Craig and I had seen that, and like nobody's really seen that. Craig came in and pitched his stuff, and there was a little caution at first of like, wow, can this auteur director really come in and deliver? And like, and it's like, shooting a micro budget indie is actually great experience for shooting a very low budget, because we are horror TV show.
That's great.
He's resourceful. He's inventive. He's got great taste. And we brought his DP, Noah Greenberg, from The Boy also, and they came and knocked it out of the park. On a very, very abbreviated schedule with no money.
Yeah, well, and I was going to say, just the planning of season 1 and season 2 back to back, because literally when we were planning this episode and scheduling with you, Don's posting stuff on Facebook going, hey, that's a wrap on season 2. Hold on a second.
I swear it was within like a week that we got the announcement that season 2 was coming, and here's what it might be about, and we're done.
It's done. And I think I can say this now, but Don was posting that because he went up to Winnipeg where we shot it, right as soon as we finished, took the same crews, same studios, even my apartment. He's now living in my apartment in Winnipeg to shoot his next Child's Play movie.
Right.
So, it's a beautiful incestuous horror world. Right here.
Well, the one thing I really wanted to know about is because, as horror fans growing up, you see one image in a Fangoria magazine and then you obsess over it because you're like, what is that? What is that movie? And I have posted pictures of the tooth creature.
Let me just say, the technical name for the internet is The Tooth Child.
The Tooth Child.
Because I saw somebody make a doll for it, which is awesome. Whoever made this kind of like pop doll, what do they call those
Hopefully
little
not a real
bobble-headed
teeth.
things?
Wow.
Funko, the Funko doll. And on the package, it said in big letters, Tooth Boy. I was like, oh. All right.
Close.
So it's the Tooth Child. That's the actual name.
Toothy. I like Toothy. Toothy's catchier.
On set, they call him, I was very irritated whenever I heard Tooth Baby. That's what the crew called her. Because it's a fresh-faced young girl in the costume. Like, when you see pictures, it sort of demystifies it. But,
the great thing about it is, whether you've seen the show or not, every time I've posted a picture of it, everybody is like, what is that?
Oh, it's amazing.
It's terrifying. Yeah. So how did that come to be? Because it's definitely the strongest visual element that you see it and you know the show because you're like, oh, that's from Cove.
Yeah. It came about because when I was breaking out the idea, the concept for the first season, which I did way before the pitch, I was just thinking a lot about childhood and all the markers and symbols of childhood, and like baby teeth kept coming up. Mm-hmm. And this was right when I was starting to write on Hannibal. So all kinds of crazy shit was going through my head. And I had a nightmare one night about a tooth child, about a little person covered in teeth. And I thought, like, wow, that'd be great in Channel Zero. At the time, this was, 2014, I guess, I didn't really think that most shows don't get made. Most pitches don't get sold. The chances of it getting on there were very low. And I pitched it for Hannibal. I tried to get it in Hannibal. At the same
tooth
time.
Baby was going in somewhere.
And it was too good. And so I had written it into the Channel Zero pitch, but I also pitched it on Hannibal and would have had to take it out of Channel Zero. And it actually ended up in several drafts of Hannibal scripts in like visions. It was going to represent Hannibal's dead sister Misha.
Oh, wow.
In visions.
Wow.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that totally makes sense.
Because he ate her.
Yeah.
So, it's a vision of mastication, basically. Wow. And eventually that got cut out. And I'm so glad that it did. Although at the time I was like, aw, I was here.
I lost the tooth kid.
Jeff Vlaming, a writer on Hannibal, who also wrote on Teen Wolf, although not at the same time as me, is a really good artist and would always sketch stuff. And he would sketch the tooth boy on the board in Hannibal. And sometimes you'd come in, there'd be this thing that looked like it had like popcorn kernels all over it with little dialogue bubbles talking to Hannibal.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Well, it's good to have something iconic like that coming out of the genre scene. It's very hard, conceptually, to find that thing that latches on to somebody's subconsciousness, and then gets spread around virally, and people go, what the hell is that?
We talked about it on our last episode, but it reached a point where my husband would cringe freak out every single time that came on screen, so I started posting pictures of him. Like, I would wait for it to come on screen, and then it'd be like snapping pictures of him because he would get so freaked out.
And I replied to him, like, think of that just falling on a hardwood floor. Sound and feel.
I'm really happy is writing it in scripts, because, we're doing all these scripts before, and I, on more than one occasion, I have to confess, this is going to look fucking stupid. There's no way we're going to pull off this tooth child idea.
I think we all did.
I'm telling you. And there was, because you kind of just try to envision it. And then the first time I saw it in the daily, I went, oh, man. I was wrong.
Yeah.
But you were not the only person who thought that. And one of the other people who thought that at many times was me. Because it's like, how are we going to execute this the way that, like, I imagine it? How the fuck? Yeah. And of course, then there's the pressure to do it CGI, which was a conversation we had many times. And I just didn't want CGI shit in the show.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit here and there. But it wasn't a fight, but it was a conversation that we had to justify it. And then, of course, the puppets are all built it's a very practical show in terms of the effects.
Well, it's the sound design that helps make the tooth child work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. How is the suit constructed? Because it looks like at any minute, I just picture the actress like meandering to the crafts table and leaving like a string of teeth along the way. Like you find them in the guacamole. Like, how did you keep everything attached? And I guess she moved around in it easy enough.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to be wearing that suit. It's not a comfortable suit. It's worth saying about the actress. She came in and she auditioned, and she's a dancer, and Craig and I were there, and she kept saying that she was a friend of Mickey's and a friend of Goofy's, and we're like, what the fuck is she talking about? And then we learned that it is the phrase that performers on Disney cruises use to say that they performed as Mickey or Goofy, because they don't want to tell the kids that, like, I'm Mickey. They say, I'm a friend of Mickey. And that becomes the euphemism among each other. So she was used to, wearing uncomfortable costumes. Right. She had played horrible monsters before. So we cast her as a tooth child. And the suit was built by, it was the first design of it was done basically as a favor by Greg Nicotero. Then we took that design and took it to Francois Degenay, who created the suits for Hannibal and who's in Toronto. And he built it, and he built an amazing maquette. I'd show it, I sent it to everybody, and suddenly, like, Harley and Don were like, oh, this is going to work. And then, built a couple different versions of the suit to get it to the final version. But we hadn't seen the final version of the suit until it came out of the box at the last minute. We even pushed the first day of shooting the Tooth Child like a week to give him some more time. And when it came out, I was like, oh, thank God, this is going to work. But even so, still, when you're shooting it and somebody's walking around set in that suit, like, it looks goofy, you know? Like, you see shots of almost any monster, like, behind the set, you're kind of, like, laughing, and it's like, oh. But when you cut it together, man, it, like...
Oh, it works.
It works.
Yeah.
How did your cast react? Because, I mean, like, you know, sticking fingers in the mouth and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean... You know, Paul Schneider is he's really a trooper. Like, he was down for whatever, and he had kind of the same questions and concerns at the beginning that everybody did. You know, Craig and I got on the phone with him, and both of us were huge fans of his, both from Assassination of Jesse James and from Bright Star and All the Real Girls. And we had this first call with Paul at a certain point, and he kind of asked the same questions, like, in some form or another, asking, like, is this gonna be fucking stupid? Am I gonna be making a fool out of myself if I'm, like, sticking my fingers in the mouth of this thing? And, like, what is this? What about the puppets? Like, what are they gonna look like? And we're telling him, you know, how they're made and what our vision of it is. And we told him about that Olivier de Sagazan was coming on, the amazing performance artist who puts the clay on his face and stuff. And, you know, he took a leap of faith. And then he's on set, and, you know, he's sticking his fingers down this girl's mouth, and it's like, and they're joking about it. It's kind of awkward. And she's sticking her tooth glove down his throat, and, you know. And Paul he'll be going like, no, deeper. You know?
Were you at all concerned about, like, my favorite thing about the film is the dream quality of the whole show. I said film. That's very revealing that I just called your show film, because that's how it feels. But the dream quality, and I mean, really, even to performance, I feel like he's almost like a somnambulist character. It feels like he's day walking through a dream, even the way he performs, because having seen him in other things, he's not always like that. So it felt very consciously like he's always looking slowly at people, and it's very measured. But the sound design, everything has to come together for that tone to work, because that's one of the tones that fails most. Anything that somebody calls Lynchian, that's not by Lynch, tends to fall quick, right? Yeah. So how concerned or how involved were you just creating every detail of that part of the vision?
Short answer, very. That stuff is, of course, very intentional, and it's a result of the mind meld between Paul and Craig in bringing the intention of our scripts to the screen. And it's also where it's so valuable to have one director for the whole six, right? Because, Paul and Craig can have a consistent dialogue. Craig and I have the dialogue before we go to camera. I'm there for the entire production, but once we're shooting, it's on Craig to get that out of Paul, and on Paul to, in a very difficult block shooting schedule where he's shooting, he's in the hallway and Olivier's coming toward him on fire, and then he's shooting sitting in the bedroom in episode 1. It's a tough role to play. It's also a tough role to cast, because you need somebody for this character, you need somebody who's both boyish and fatherly, who can talk to kids, and who can both be likable, but also really, contain a depth of pain. And it was tough, we had a list of, I don't know how many people, but Paul was our first choice. And, it's he doesn't say yes to a lot. So
yeah, you do notice that. Yeah, you don't see a lot, and there's a lot of nightmare images. And I don't want to spoil things for people who haven't seen it, but there's one towards the end, and might have been in the finale, and it's not part of the narrative, so I don't think it's running thing. But it's the creepiest thing I saw this year, and it's all the kids sitting in a classroom. And I guess they all have dead faces, and their mouths are wide open, and it's only a couple seconds. But I remember going, "Whoa!" I don't need to know what's going on there, but it's a little terrifying. So Rob starts every one of our shows. Usually today was the first time I think ever we didn't, but trying to find out where your horror roots are as kids, or where you first saw images that maybe shocked or surprised or made you interested, because that's one of those images that I imagine if a kid walked in a room, saw that image, kinder trauma right there, it's disturbing.
I've always been a horror kid. I was particularly affected by Night of the Living Dead when I was a kid. When I was about 8 or 9, I saw Night of the Living Dead, which at the time to me was not campy at all. And years later, I saw it at a MoMA screening on Halloween in New York, and people were like laughing. I was like, it's not funny.
Yeah. I don't think it's funny. No.
I find that movie still just deeply, deeply, viscerally disturbing. And I also, like when I was much younger, when I was like 4 and 5, saw both Jaws and the first Indiana Jones, which for whatever reason, well, I guess they're terrifying to a kid that age. But like the face is melting off at the end of Indiana Jones, and of course all the deaths in Jaws. Those horrified me. And then when I was like 12, I saw my parents showed me The Shining.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's, those things stick with you.
What about you, Harley?
Me?
You're not getting out of this.
Because you have to understand, on this show, it was a complete dictionary of horror every day I walked to work. And Nick doesn't know this, but I was lying at least half the time when I went, I know that movie.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's just like that movie. So those, particularly a lot of the newer ones, I'm not that familiar with. But for me, it's like, as a kid, I remember watching House on the Haunted Hill, for God's sakes, right? With fucking Vincent. I mean, it's scary enough. Or The Haunting with Julie Harris.
Great.
It's all that stuff about, who held your hand all those weird things, and that mixed with a lot of Hitchcock for me. So it was really that, but for me, it was always more about science. Actually, the kind of sci-fi that sci-fi usually does. That's the thing that I'm actually in a way more familiar with. Lynch was really sort of a detour for me. It was a great one. But
does Lynch reference? Because I know I've seen. There's a few movies that you can see, like Wizard of Oz and Hour of the Wolf. There's some movies I can just see influence in his stuff.
But they're kind of overt.
Yeah, those are these are things he probably saw when he was a kid. But does he reference cinema when you guys are writing, or is he's just in his own kind of world?
No, he's in his.
It's Lynch world.
I don't think. No, he's in his own thing, and you're not going to get in the way of that.
Yeah.
We asked Harley for so much Twin Peaks trivia. And it's also worth noting that all of us were humbled before the horror cinema and really cinema in general knowledge of Don Mancini, who's like an encyclopedia of horror stuff and of just everything. He knows it all.
Yeah.
So
Don, you're missed on this episode.
Yeah.
We'll come in. But we know, we'll get you a
He said when the
Chucky.
new Chucky happens, he's coming on.
Really quick, did you have any pushback from SyFy in terms of the child violence that was going on? Because that was jarring to me. I love it, but
exactly.
Not too much. We had the kind of due diligence concerns of we're not going to see the guts, this isn't going to be Rob Zombie. But it helped that from the very beginning we had said, basically, this is tasteful horror. The disturbing stuff is what you don't see. And I think we really stuck to that. And overall, we got way less pushback from SyFy than I've seen on most other shows that I've worked on. They were as good as their word. All the stuff that Bill told me on that first phone call was, that's the show that we made. And
they were great.
You have, in the creative process, and this is really more in the writer's room and then in post, in editing, it's a series of conversations. But we were not stopped from doing anything that we wanted to do. We had to justify our creative decisions, but there's nothing that I really wanted to do that we weren't able to do.
That we couldn't. They were great, and although there is always that funny moment when they're saying, "Make something elevated," and then you inevitably get to that moment where they say, is it too elevated?
Yeah.
Right? So you do. And the thing that's so amazing, I think, about this show that I didn't see coming, because you start getting the reviews coming in, you're going, wow, this is so awesome, right? Yeah. All these people are really loving it. And it's because if you're turning the dial, you're not seeing anything like Tenet. There's nothing like that on television. And that's because of what Nick and Craig did. I mean, the way it looks, the way it feels. Part of that's the pacing. Right, and part of that's the way it kind of pulls you in slowly and then holds on to you, and so it's to SyFy's credit that they wrestled with it a little and then kind of got on board.
If I was flipping channels, I'd think it was Rectify on Sundays.
I
love Rectify, but it looks like Rectify,
exactly right.
But then with puppets and creatures, which is a great thing. I think that's great. Well, let's talk about season two. Because a friend of mine who said to me a couple of days ago, "Oh, my friend's directing an episode," which means all of the episodes. Who went to film school at SCAD. We all went to SCAD.
Was it Ben?
Yeah, Ben Collins.
Yeah.
And so he told me that, and because it was the guy made Uncle John. But see, I haven't seen Uncle John. Is that the movie that got him the gig? Or?
Yeah, it's his only movie.
Okay, so it's on streaming on Netflix. So I just put it up there when I heard it.
Yeah, you should watch it.
All right.
And it's interesting because what Harley says, at the time that we were hiring a director for season 2, I mean, at the time that we were hiring Steven, and he had to go through sort of the gauntlet that you have to go through of you pitch the studio, you pitch the network, and they say, we're really going to hire this guy who's directed one movie for $90,000, you know, and but at that time, we had just started shooting season 1, so they were seeing the dailies come in, and they were seeing what a great job Craig and Noah were doing, and they had, you know, to their immense credit, made a bet on Craig and you know, said, all right, we're going to let, you know, we'll do this. And because he was doing so well, it really helped our case. Like, we could, you know, part of our argument for Steven is he's an auteur like Craig. And it's a very specific kind of filmmaker that I'm looking for, right? I think of it as like, we got to have a collaborative auteur every season. You know, somebody who is going to bring their own voice and vision, but also is excited by and is going to respect the intention that's already there in the scripts. Because we write the scripts very visually. You know, it's not like writing a feature script. And I learned this from Brian Fuller on Hannibal. If you want to have a show that's visually distinctive, you make it visually distinctive in the script. You know, we write shots into the script. We say, you know, and then angle on, and then we push in, and then you know, and the light is like this. But when a director like Craig or Steven comes on, you know, they're empowered, and it's not like you have to shoot this exact shot. It's like that is in the script to tell you what the intention of the scene is, and what the perspective of the scene is, and what the effect it should have on the viewer is. You know, you're the director, and if you have a better way to do that, do it, and they do. You know, like, and particularly when, you know, we have just like we have one director doing the entire thing, we have one DP doing the entire thing, and, you know, they're artists too. And Noah Greenberg on the first season, Isaac Bauman on the second season, really have made the show kind of visually beautiful in the way that I dared to hope that it would be.
But are you looking for, when you say you're looking for a specific director, are you looking for a quality for the particular season in their work, or could Steven have done season 1 too?
No,
of
course.
Something about season 2 that connects with the film you saw?
Yes,
okay,
very much
cool.
so. The material guides the choice for sure.
Okay.
And then they take it further. Season 1 was always supposed to be a restrained, kind of pastoral, chilling, dread-filled, nightmarish thing, and The Boy, Craig's film, is the perfect credit for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes place in the 80s. It has a fantastic child performance. There's nobody who I wanted more than Craig.
Yeah.
You know, it was perfect. And season 2, you know, without going into too much detail about it, Steven's film, which I highly recommend, is not a horror film. It's really hard to describe in terms of what it is, because it's part like young person, millennial, kind of mumblecore romance. He would hate me for saying that, but it kind of has that vibe of like two young people sort of coming together, and it is very naturalistic performances and a kind of handheld captured feel. And then at the same time, it's a story about this older guy in a small town who has committed a murder, and it's a suspense thriller. And those two stories interact in a way that is really unusual. I haven't seen in another film. And it has a voice. You know, the film it says something about the world. Yeah. It has a perspective. And I really respected that and really admired it. And it's also a visually beautiful film and a very well edited film. That's another thing, by the way. I want the directors to. It's a huge plus if the directors have editing experience and specific skill. So Steven's Uncle John is like the perfect thing for season 2, and you'll see when you see it.
I know there's
like
a teaser out, so can you tell us anything like when it's set or anything like whatever's already out there
Which
in the world?
creepypasta is it coming from?
When does it air?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's based on No End House by Brian Russell, which is another popular viral creepypasta. And No End House is a haunted house in the sense of like a haunted fun house, not, we've moved into a new house and here's something upstairs. And you go, it's a series of rooms. Each one is scarier than the last. And if you make it through all the rooms, you win a prize. And Brian's story, I don't want to give away the twist of Brian's story. Go online and read it. We just took that basic core concept and built a world around it. And I would describe the vibe of season 2 as it's basically It Follows meets Solaris.
Oh, whoa.
And it looks
I did
and
see
feels.
Solaris.
Oh, yeah.
Which one?
Solaris, the 6-hour version.
Yeah.
Pacific Film
Tchaikovsky.
Archives.
Well, you should see It Follows.
Yeah.
It's very different from season 1. It has the same principles behind it.
Right.
The same horror, atmosphere of dread kind of feel, but it in other ways, it's very different. And thematically, it's actually connected to season 1 too. It deals with some of the same themes. I mean, they were written in the same writer's room at the same time. But you will feel Steven's voice, and you'll feel our intention to tell a different kind of story.
It's awesome. I'm just going to say it. I'm so excited for when it comes out. But who knows when it comes out, right?
Oh, have they not said it yet?
Well, it was originally planned to come out in like 1 year after the first one. This is going to be a Halloween thing.
Like October of next year.
I don't think that's set. I haven't been given a date. It, in theory, might air earlier. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So
We hope so. Can't wait for it.
yeah.
I'm sure Ryan has asked you about this, but now it's my turn. A few months ago, we had Oz Perkins on the show.
Yeah.
And the most surprising thing to come out of that chat was we asked him, is there any horror property you would have done? Because he's a pretty original voice. And he's like, Friday the 13th, man, I would have done that. And we were like, really? And lo and behold, I look up your IMDb and you wrote a version of Friday the 13th.
Okay, here's the thing. Friday the 13th, and Oz Perkins' Friday the 13th would be fucking amazing. And that is the way to do these horror reboots, right? Like bring in auteur directors, bring in directors with voices to do them. I mean, whatever you think of the Rob Zombie Halloween, that's the way to do it. Like bring in somebody with a real voice to do their take on it. Like, and so I did do a draft for Friday the 13th. And I always get asked about this. I'll give you the no bullshit version of what happened. They had been doing it as a found footage movie for a long time. And I was brought in and, like, hey, do you want to maybe take a pass on the Friday the 13th script they have? It's not quite ready to go. Sure. So I sat down with David Bruckner, who was the director who was attached at the time, who did all these great
He would have
films.
been great, I think.
Yeah.
He would have been great. And I love David Bruckner. I really want to do something with him. He had this found footage draft that just wasn't there. And so we worked out a new take on it. And I was not very enthusiastic about the found footage concept, but we had a version I think would have been cool. Then I pitched. We didn't hear anything for a long time. I thought, well, I guess I didn't get the job. Then I got a call and said, hey, you got the job, and it's not found footage anymore. I said, okay, great. But you realize that means it is a page 1 rewrite, a whole new script, right? Oh, yeah, I guess so. Okay. So, so I sat down and rebroke it as not a found footage movie. Wrote a whole, new version. It had some of the beats from the original. I mean, it was still a story at camp with kids. And what Dave and I really wanted to do, and I've said this other places, is a Dazed and Confused meets Jason, right?
Nice.
Like a real character story that felt like a real period piece and had all the crazy shit that you want from a Friday the 13th movie. We wrote it and turned it in, and then there was a regime change at the Paramount. We never heard anything else. And David was off the project. He's off directing another movie now. I am very excited to see the version they do make. I know the Prisoner's screenwriter wrote it. I haven't read it, but he's a great writer. I'm curious to see what it is.
But were you a big fan of the franchise? Was that the sort of thing you were excited to tackle?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the reason I was excited to do it was to play with the character, like play with an iconic boogeyman. Like that's just so fucking cool, for a horror fan.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the thing about the Friday the 13th franchise is with like Halloween or something, like the first, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like the first one is a masterpiece.
Yep.
Like cinematically, it's a masterpiece. And I would be scared to write one. I would be like, I don't really want to write a Halloween movie. There is one and it's perfect. I love the Friday the 13th movies, but there isn't one that's perfect. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, oh man, the fucking first one. It's like,
well, except for 4, but yeah.
I would have said 7, but
my favorites
okay.
are 4 and 6.
6.
Yeah, 4 and 6 for sure.
Come on, guys, give 7 some love. Come on.
Have you seen any horror? You
I
can
saw
be honest.
Solaris, the Russian
It's a good movie.
more than once.
Criterion.
We also have a Solaris podcast. I think we got that before.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for
Very cool.
entertaining my curiosity about Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Very cool. So,
very cool.
so please keep us posted on when season 2 begins.
Yes.
And does the season 1 of Channel Zero live somewhere right now where people can listen to the podcast? Is it like on SyFy?
Yeah, I think it's on SyFy.com. You can certainly get it on iTunes.
Yeah.
It was free to stream on SyFy.com and may still be.
It's free. I have Xfinity, and I know it's free to stream on that. At least the last 3 episodes are.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Well, yeah, if you just want to watch the last 3 episodes. They're not
I assume they
Watch
cycle.
all 6.
yeah.
It's probably even scarier that way. You just start watching that show
I don't know
halfway.
what the fuck is going on.
Well, thank you both for coming on and letting us peek behind the curtain on the show.
Yeah.
Looking forward to season 2, and thanks again.
And
you.
before we end, Harley, any Jack Nance story to end with?
No, just that, like everything involved in that, you just spent time with extraordinary people.
Yeah.
And Jack Nance off camera was more interesting than
I believe it.
him
Jack
on
Nance just looks
camera.
like a character to me.
No, he's an amazing man.
All right, well, there's a fish in the percolator or a sock in the percolator, whichever one it ended up being.
We're going to lock
a
you two in a room.
All right, this will be a different podcast.
Anytime.
Thanks for the great
so much,
show.
guys.
Seriously.
Thanks, guys.